The world seemed trapped in a violent seizure. The darkness of the endless night was savaged, torn apart by the spreading wildfire and the disorienting flashes of numerous firing armaments. The cacophony of thunderous salvos and inhuman shrieks fused into an almost palpable force, pressing down on Sunny from all sides. Some distance away, above the burning nightmare of the killing field, the devouring cloud had reshaped itself to create a breach in the wall of flames. A dark mass of brood beasts poured forward, rushing to reach the defensive barrier of the last human city. The incoming segment of the swarm swirled, forming into a long and vast protuberance. It looked like a giant tentacle that grew and twisted, aiming for a single spot on the city wall, the dome of shimmering energy where Dale and Winter were making their stand. Something is indeed very wrong. Since when was the devouring cloud so purposeful? How could the swarm of mindless brood beasts not only identify the deadliest threat, but also show enough coordinated intent to try taking it out first? Feeling a chill run down his spine, Sunny activated the dying wish and watched as the tip of the dark protuberance pivoted, changing its direction to attack him instead. Wonderful. He glanced at Jet, lingered for a moment, and then asked in a hoarse voice, "Are you sure that we want to do this?" Soul Reaper lowered her graceful glaive, a thin layer of ice slowly thickening on its silver blade. Brushing her raven black hair back, she smiled from the corner of her mouth. "What do our wishes have to do with anything?" Sunny looked back at the approaching swarm and sighed. "Fair enough." At that point, most of the weapons on the southern section of the wall had concentrated their fire on the advancing protuberance. It was being torn by the heavy tungsten rounds of the railguns, the storm of bullets unleashed by countless turrets, the sporadic rifle fire of mundane infantrymen, and the memories and abilities of enlightened soldiers. As Sunny watched, masses of miniature missiles shot from the shoulders of the towering MWPs, streaking across the sky and blasting countless monstrosities to shreds. The attacking swarm was continuously breaking and rebuilding itself, new brood beasts instantly taking the place of the killed ones to close the gaps. It was not showing any signs of slowing down, though, which meant that Sunny would not escape it. Well, he was not worried. "Sure you are." Sunny winced and glanced at the Sin of Solace with displeasure. His mental defenses were supposed to be quite high right now. Why wasn't the damned sword affected at all? Yes. Your new shiny shell is as good a reason to feel confident as any, I guess. And if that is not enough, you can always escape into the shadows, right? Sunny pretended not to hear the insidious voice. Have you not stopped to think about Jet, though? Where would she escape? Are you ready to watch her die? You better be. An outsider like her does not matter anyway. Sunny glanced at Master Jet, who was observing the swarm by his side. Her beautiful face was calm and focused. He sighed. You are very proud of yourself, aren't you? Toying with me, playing on my deepest fears and insecurities. But aren't you embarrassed of yourself a little? The Sin of Solace did not answer. I'll admit, you did catch me by surprise a couple of times. However, now that I know what to expect, why would such childish jabs have any effect on me? I don't know whether you are the voice of the cursed sword, or simply a part of my subconscious, twisted by it, although the latter seems more probable. However, one thing I do know is that you are out of your league here, buddy. He shook the beautiful Jian slightly. I mean, who do you think you are? You are not the voice of Ariel, the demon of dread. You are merely a memory of an echo of a whisper. Something that pathetic wants to drive me crazy? Please, don't make me laugh. There were a few moments of silence, and then the insidious voice answered mockingly. "And yet, here you are, talking to an imaginary voice in the middle of a battle." Sunny smiled. "So what? Hearing voices and talking to myself is somewhat of a hobby of mine." Been there, done that. He pushed the annoying whispers to the back of his mind and concentrated on what was about to come. A small shadow suddenly fell from the sky. Sunny almost moved to attack it, but then held himself back. In the next moment, a familiar crow landed on Jet's shoulder, glanced at him arrogantly, and turned to its master.
"Swarm! Swarm!"
Jet patted the bird on the head with a small smile. "Yes, I know. Now go. It is going to be too dangerous for you." The crow let out an outraged caw and spread its wings to make itself look bigger, but to no avail. She had already dismissed the echo, making it dissipate into a swirl of sparks. A few seconds later, the swarm was upon them. The first of the lunging brood beasts was cleanly severed in half by Jet's glaive, two bleeding slabs of hideous flesh flying over the wall to fall into the siege camp below. But the next one was already attacking. Sunny allowed his mind to switch into the state of battle clarity, or rather, dive deeper into it, since clarity had long become like a second nature to him. His thoughts accelerated, and his perception of the world became sharper, clearer, and more encompassing. He moved forward with light steps, the sin of Solus flashing through the air to pierce the creature's body. Its flesh parted before the jade blade like water. At the same time, the shadows around them stirred, and a dozen black tentacles rose from them, grabbing the attacking brood beasts and tearing them apart. The tentacles were different and much more complex than the ones he had usually summoned before. These old joints and a semblance of structure ending with crude but nimble and powerful hands. Sunny's long hours of practice had not been in vain. He had pushed his grasp of shadow manifestation forward by a lot. Of course, using it burned through his essence. Everything Sunny did required him to spend essence, weaving shadow strings, repeatedly summoning the strike of thunder, sustaining and augmenting the effect of the dying wish, saturating his body with resilience and strength. Any other master would have been drained of all energy already, but Sunny's reserves of essence were vast and potent. More than 4 times the volume of almost anyone else of the same rank. At the same time, his control of it was nothing short of exquisite, allowing for near perfect efficiency. He had a lot of fight left in him still. The question was whether that would be enough. The swarm of brood beasts descended upon Sunny and Master Jet. The two of them moved with speed that would have seemed utterly inhuman to mundane soldiers. If any of them had remained nearby, curiously enough, a master would have been stunned just as much. Both ascended irregulars were showing a level of physical prowess that only those with extremely powerful combat aspects were supposed to possess. Soul Reaper's glaive turned into a blur as she spun it, dissecting scores of the ghastly abominations. The gorgeous Jade Jian danced like a feather, harvesting life after life. Of course, neither Sunny nor Jet remained static, moving across the wide expanse of the battlement, similar to a hurricane of cutting steel. They danced between the attacking nightmare creatures, never remaining in one spot long enough to be buried under their onslaught. Well, Sunny danced. His battle style was graceful and fluid to the point where it seemed as though he had no rigid shape at all. Master Jet, on the other hand, fought with the dire and straightforward inevitability of an experienced butcher, slaughtering her enemies both methodically and ruthlessly. There was an awful beauty to her mesmerizing savagery as well.
"Get ready!"
Sunny did not need the warning. The whirlwind of abomination surrounding them was already poor enough, but it was also just the beginning. Most of the protuberance of the devouring cloud had yet to reach them, and the situation was about to become numerous times worse.
Oh, why did I come to this damned continent?
Full of self-pity, he pivoted to the right, narrowly avoided a diving brood beast, and brandished the Sin of Solace to cut down another one. At the same time, he glanced over the edge of the wall, where a long stretch of the world was obscured by the swarm of abominations. By now, the two of them were surrounded from all sides, but most of the enemies were still coming from a single direction. The excellent news was that the dying wish was working, preventing the brood beasts from passing the wall and escaping into the city. The poor news was that he could not see the glow of winter's flames at all now, which meant that the part of the swarm attacking them was a second at most from growing much harder to deal with. There had to be numerous of them to obscure the wildfire entirely. Sunny called upon the shadows, and a black wall suddenly rose between the battlement and the main body of the protuberance. Countless brood beasts slammed into it in the next moment, impaling themselves on the sharp spikes that shot from the black surface. Even more had to twist in the air to avoid the obstacle. That did not slow the swarm much, but it did funnel it somewhat, giving Sunny and Jet some room to breathe, at least for a moment. Then, things got tense.
Damn it!
There were too numerous brood beasts lunging at him to kill and evade them all. Sunny did his best, but it was still not enough. Even with the help of shadow hands, he was forced to receive several attacks head-on. Making his body as heavy as a slab of rock, Sunny gritted his teeth and stood his ground. A disgusting leathery body slammed into him. If he had not used the Feather of Truth to change his mass, the impact would have thrown Sunny to the ground, or even worse, off the wall. As it was, he only took a half step back, while the brood beast bounced back with a nauseating crunch of breaking bones.
That hurt.
Before Sunny could do anything, another creature tore into his forearm. The leather vambrace of the puppeteer's shroud held some of the horrid fangs back, but not all of them. However, the creature's fangs scraped fruitlessly against Sunny's skin, not leaving even a scratch on it. He grinned.
Chew on this, bastard.
With that, Sunny spun the Sin of Solace into reverse grip and easily cut through the abomination's long neck. Usually it would have been difficult to deal any damage from such an awkward position, but the jade blade of the cursed sword was so sharp that he did not have to put any effort into the cut at all. The brood beast's body convulsed and fell down. Its severed maw, however, was still stubbornly trying to gnaw on Sunny's flesh.
Whatever.
Ignoring the vice-like and unpleasantly moist grasp of the creature's jaw, he threw himself back into the battle. A few moments later, it flew off his forearm, pulled away by powerful inertia. Sadly, that was not the last abomination that managed to hit him. As their numbers grew and grew, Sunny started to miss more attacks. Most of them failed to penetrate the adamantine barrier of the marble shell, but a few did not. There were now shallow scratches here and there on his body, and their number was swiftly increasing. Master Jet was in a similar position, although she did not seem to be bothered by it at all. Even though her black leather armor was torn and shredded, revealing glimpses of alabaster skin and trickles of crimson blood, she fought with the same unrestrained, magnificent brutality. There was even a dark, wicked grin on her face.
What is wrong with that woman?
He wasted a moment to shift his sight and glance at her core, only to see that it was brimming with essence, full to the limit. That cost him another scratch as well as a pang of envy.
Damn it! Master Jet's aspect is simply cheating.
To be fair, His aspect was somewhat of a cheat as well. More than that, both of them were fighting in nearly optimal conditions. Soul Reaper was well suited to fight against large numbers of weaker enemies who could provide her with a nearly endless supply of essence, while Sunny was a true menace when surrounded by shadows. Throughout the cruel length of the polar night, the whole world was enveloped by shadows, and he was their master. And yet, both of them were in dire danger. Even if individual brood beasts did not pose much of a threat to the two Ascended, thousands and thousands of them did. An army of ants was more than capable of killing an elephant. Whatever an elephant was. Grinding his teeth, Sunny danced between the countless abominations and felt his own essence disappear with frightening speed.
Winter better be very busy obliterating the main body of the swarm fast.
Black pillars of smoke rose into the sky, obscuring the stars like a smoldering veil. Between the roiling dark heaven and the cold, ravaged land, a fiery inferno seethed and swarmed, drowning the world in a scorching orange glow. Surrounded by numerous abominations and the cacophonous roar of heavy armaments, Sunny and Jet fought against the devouring cloud. The wind was picking up. Struggling not to slip on the fetid blood that covered the alloy expanse of the battlement, Sunny pulled Soul Reaper close and bent down, summoning a dome of shadows to surround them. His breathing was hoarse and labored. There was no light inside the improvised shelter, and the brood beasts were already attacking it, the whole structure trembling under an onslaught of heavy blows. Worse still, he did not dare to sustain the barrier for more than a few seconds, afraid that the swarm would lose interest and shift its attention to the city beyond.
I won't last much longer.
Master Jet was uncomfortably close, her physical state as battered and bloodied as his. Her chest rose and fell erratically, betraying the same level of exhaustion. Nevertheless, her voice sounded calm. "You can't fight anymore?" He shook his head, then spoke after realizing that she probably could not see him.
No, not that. I don't have enough essence left to keep it active for long.
She lingered for a moment. "Do what you can. After that, let's see what fate has in store." Sunny winced at her choice of words, then considered if it was time to summon Nightmare. The black steed would help survive the tide of brood beasts, but the two of them were not at the point of needing to be rescued yet. It was supplying the dying wish with the essence that was the problem. Nightmare was also large and lacked armor. His main defense was speed and viciousness, which would not protect him against the swarm. If the Shadow Stallion sustained heavy wounds today, Sunny would not be able to call upon him tomorrow.
Back to the slaughter then.
He glanced at Jet.
Ready?
She smiled in the darkness. "Always?" He allowed the suffering shadows to lose substance, and the black dome fell apart around them. Immediately, a flood of brood beasts descended upon the two Ascended. Sunny and Jet were pushed back to back, unable to move. The jade longsword and the silver glaive blurred, tearing through the ghastly abominations. The smell of blood permeated the air. It was somewhat of a heroic scene, exactly like what he had often seen in dramas and webtoons about Valiant Awakened. Not very practical, though. Stuck in one spot and limited in where he could move, Sunny became a perfect target.
Curse it!
A strong gale of wind slammed into them, throwing many brood beasts off course. Jet used that moment to lunge forward and brandish her glaive, causing an explosion of frost to spread through the swarm and clear a bit of space around them. High above, the veil of smoke looked like storm clouds. Sunny was still feeding his essence into the dying wish and sustaining the augmentation of the underworld armament, hoping to buy Winter another minute, maybe half a minute. But the devouring cloud seemed to have suddenly learned how to resist Solvain's charm. Without any provocation, the mass of brood beasts shifted, flashing past the two bloodied masters, ignoring the alluring enchantment of the dying wish. They lunged in the direction where Dale's protective barrier still gleamed with mystical energy.
What the hell?
Sunny slashed at the nearest abomination, cutting it in half. The other brood beast simply ignored him and flew away.
You have slain an awakened beast, brood of the devouring cloud. You have received.
He ignored the whisper of the spell and stared at the apocalyptic scene of the battlefield. The killing field below the wall was enveloped in flame. The sky was burning with red embers as well. The main body of the swarm seemed diminished somewhat. Where once there had been an uninterrupted wall of winged horrors, now there was a tattered curtain of them, with vast breaches and gaps in its vile, seething mass. Winter and all the other defenders did not waste the time he had bought them. The problem, however, was that the flames unleashed by the ascended archer in her initial attack had almost died down. And now, the whole of the devouring cloud was advancing on the city. This was a key moment. Winter had to break their advance once and for all, and for that to happen, nothing could interrupt her.
God damn it!
Sunny prepared himself, ready to dash toward the position of the rest of the irregulars. He could see a dark tentacle of the thinned protuberance slamming into Dale's barrier, the wind howling so loudly that it drowned out the thunder of the firing railguns for a moment. The barrier grew dimmer, but held for now. A radiant arrow escaped from it, streaking across the killing field and disappearing into the devouring cloud. Then, it was as though a large portion of the swarm imploded in on itself, countless abominations being violently pulled and crushed by an invisible force. However, it was still not enough. Dale's barrier was growing dimmer and dimmer, and the swarm was still advancing, a dozen seconds away from crashing into the defenders of the city. And then, a vast shadow fell from the sky, tearing through the veil of smoke and storm clouds obscuring it. At the same time, a destructive net of lightning surrounded the devouring cloud, turning the world white for a second. Thousands of abominations were instantly burned to ash. A giant bird of prey, with white feathers and devastating talons of lustrous steel, dove into the swarm. Her enormous wings were wreathed in thunderclouds, and bolts of lightning danced around her body like a cloak. A hurricane of wind, summoned by her arrival, threw the center of the devouring cloud into disarray. Sunny froze.
Sky Tide!
Saint Tyrus looked beaten and exhausted, but still incredibly fearsome. Her white feathers were painted with blood, and there was a thin layer of ice covering many parts of her body. Despite all that, she cut through the swarm like the blade of a guillotine, and at the same time, powerful winds squeezed the monstrosities down and pushed them away from the city. Sunny stared at the incredible scene in tired silence. He had never been that happy to see a saint before. Lowering the sin of solace, he looked at Master Jet. A somewhat disoriented question escaped from his lips.
Have we won?
She lingered for a moment, then shrugged.
It seems that we...
Before Soul Reaper could finish the sentence, however, the city wall suddenly quaked under them. The wall trembled violently, almost throwing Sunny off his feet. He caught himself from falling and spun, the sin of Solus flying into a defensive stance.
What the hell was that?
Master Jet used her glaive to keep herself upright and looked around. For the first time since the start of the battle, her expression became grim. She did not answer for a couple of seconds. Then her icy eyes widened slightly. Soul Reaper turned to Sunny, trying to say something, but he had already sensed it himself. A cold shiver ran down his spine. The call! The call of the nightmare had suddenly grown much louder, assaulting his mind with an onslaught of screaming whispers. In the next moment, the world came undone, and the piercing sound of tearing alloy filled Sunny's ears. The battlement beneath him was falling apart, and a strong aftershock of whatever it was that had destroyed it rolled through the air, throwing him away. No! Sunny did not see it yet, but he already understood what had happened. A nightmare gate had just opened, right below where he and Jet had fought, annihilating a large section of the wall. An ugly rift in reality tore through the armored alloy, turning it into nothing. The vertical schism of pure nothingness played strange tricks with both light and darkness, making it appear simultaneously perfectly flat and inconceivably deep. A litany of inaudible screams thundered out of it in deafening silence, washing over the world like a demented call. The wall was breached from top to bottom, some of it devoured by the gate, the rest simply collapsing when the supporting structure suddenly disappeared. Sunny plummeted down in a rain of debris. Before he could truly comprehend what was happening, his body brushed against the boundary of the gate. Instantly, an explosion of blinding pain enveloped his body and soul, and a strange repelling force pushed him away. A nightmare gate was a one-way path. Creatures of the dream realm could enter through it into the waking world, but nothing from the waking world could pass through it into the land of nightmares. Only awakened could answer its call by sending their souls on a perilous journey. All they had to do was fall asleep in the vicinity of the rift. Masters and saints could answer it too by pulling on their anchors, but not by physically stepping through the gate. Maybe sovereigns were different, but Sunny had no time to ponder about it. Or could ponder about it. For a few moments after experiencing the shock of brushing against the lightless rift, his mind became utterly blank. And when he came to his senses, he found himself falling from a 70-meter height, the ground approaching him with frightening speed. Still disoriented, Sunny scrambled to summon the Dark Wing, but then froze for a split second. There was not enough time for the translucent memory to manifest itself into existence, and for its enchantment to activate. He had maybe 3 seconds left. Would a fall from that height murder him? Sunny did not know, and he did not want to find out. Even if he survived somehow, a flood of nightmare creatures would soon flow out of the gate to finish the job.
Damn!
Something heavy and sharp suddenly slammed into Sunny's head. A torn piece of the wall's frame. Following an instinct, Sunny reached forward and called upon the shadows of the falling pieces of debris. They moved, sliding toward his body. Sunny made himself as light as he could, and then manifested the shadows. In the next moment, a vast mantle of darkness surrounded him like a streaming black cape, catching the wind and slowing down his fall. It was almost enough. He hit the ground hard enough to bounce off it and black out for a moment. The mantle of shadows was torn apart and dissipated. Sunny rolled away, his body a mass of pain. Vaguely recognizing the landscape of the staging area around him, he came to a halt after violently slamming into the feet of a loader robot. Then weakly crawled under it, hoping to hide from the raining debris. It was good thinking. Not a second later, a piece of alloy that must have weighed several tons crashed into the ground in the spot where Sonny had been just a moment ago. That was all Sonny could do, though. After taking shelter between the legs of the loader, all strength seemed to abandon him. All that was left was pain. He was alive, at least. Bone weave and the marble shell, as well as his ascended physique, had protected Sonny's body from being severely damaged. He was a bit shocked, that was all. Arguably, touching the gate had caused him much more harm. Sonny did not know what kind of damage he had received, but it felt serious. He knew he could still fight, maybe, but not right now. Right now, he could hardly move. Not good. From his temporary shelter, Sonny had a clear view of the broken wall and the vast rift of nothingness pulsing darkly in the breach. A few soldiers and logistics specialists were running away from it, consumed by panic. A few more lay dead, killed by the debris. A tide of nightmare creatures was about to emerge from the gate, flood the staging area, and devour everyone here before escaping into the city. And Sonny was utterly defenseless. A cold voice suddenly resounded in his ear. "See, I told you that you're useless." Sonny gritted his teeth. "Shut up." His laughter was the answer. "I also told you that Master Jet was going to die, didn't I?" He growled. "I said shut the hell up." Pushing through pain and weakness, Sonny forced himself to start crawling. He wanted to crawl away, but somehow found himself crawling toward the gate. The desire to flee had been subtly defeated by the desire to finish his duty and defend the city, without him even noticing. "I must have lost it. What am I planning to do in this state?" Maybe there was some strategy left. There surely was. He was just too rattled and concussed to ponder it. There was the dying wish. There was also nightmare. As a massive shape slowly revealed itself in the pulsating darkness of the gate, a familiar tone whispered in his ear. Sonny felt a flash of rage sear his mind. "Shut your mouth!" But then, he froze. That voice was not his. Ignoring the rude outburst, the spell spoke.
Your shadow has evolved.
My shadow? Sonny unlocked his eyes wide. Saint! It seemed that Saint had finished her evolution into a devil ahead of schedule. All things considered, her timing was nothing short of impeccable. Even in his disoriented state, Sonny knew that he could not ignore such luck. As the first of the nightmare creatures emerged from the gate, he abandoned his attempts to crawl forward and called upon his shadow instead. The coldness of the polar night seemed to grow slightly darker. Then, an intricate sabaton forged out of black stone-like metal stepped on the ground beside him. Sonny weakly turned his head to look up at Saint, who was as aloof as ever. His taciturn knight had changed. Initially, she had been roughly the same height as him, becoming taller after evolving into a demon. Now, Saint towered above Sonny. Obscured by the beautiful onyx armor, the lines of her stone body were still slender and graceful, but at more than 2 meters of height, the fearsome shadow seemed extremely imposing. Her oppressive presence was worthy of a devil. The black armor itself had not changed much. It had always been a product of magnificent craftsmanship and seemed even more superb and menacing now. However, Saint's skin, which had been gray like stone before, then white as alabaster, was now smooth and black as polished onyx. At least what little of it could be seen through the slits of her visor. The ruby jewels of her eyes burned with ominous crimson flames. Saint studied the vast rift of the Nightmare Gate indifferently, then glanced at Sunny. It almost seemed as though she had a lot of questions. He forced out a weak smile.
Yeah, stuff happened. I'm glad to see you too.
Then he raised a trembling hand and pointed at the emerging nightmare creatures.
Go deal with them, if you don't mind. I'll stay here for a bit.
Saint lingered for a moment, then silently turned to the flood of monstrous creatures and strolled forward. Her steps were calm and steady. Sunny let his hand drop back to the ground.
It's good to have her back.
Hoisting himself up to sit, his back leaning against a piece of rubble, Sunny used some of his last essence to send the broken oath to the taciturn devil. Then, he commanded all 4 of his shadows to abandon him and embrace Saint instead. Her tall figure shone with a dark radiance. The shadows around the demonic knight swelled, becoming deeper and darker, surrounding her like a tenebrous mantle, which was all expected. What Sunny had not expected, however, was that there was a hint of true elemental darkness in that lightless glow. It made him shiver. A few dozen meters away from them, the nightmare creatures were being born from the revolting nothingness of the gate. A flood of them rushed forward, chasing after the retreating soldiers and non-combatants. The abominations looked like tall insect humanoids with 6 hands each, their inhuman faces brimming with black eyes and jagged mandibles. They wore carapace armor and wielded weapons made of sharpened chitin, moving with astonishing speed and possessing dreadful might. As Sunny watched, one of the creatures easily threw a piece of the broken wall that must have weighed a ton aside. Unfazed, Saint unlocked her arms, as if trying to embrace the broken burning world. Darkness flowed from under her vambraces, over her palms, and into the air. A moment later, the flowing darkness formed into the shape of a familiar stone sword. It was whole once again, but utterly black in appearance. A feeling of dark, nebulous power radiated from its Stygian blade. On her other hand, a round shield of stone-like metal appeared. Its surface the same polished onyx as the fearsome armor of the taciturn shadow. Walking toward the enemy, Saint raised her sword and struck the rim of her shield twice with its blade, as if challenging the harrowing tide of monsters.
Damn.
Sunny was too weak and mentally shaken to do anything, so he just sat on the ground, using a piece of rubble for support, and watched Saint fight. His shadow had simply strolled forward and then dove into the massive enemies as soon as the last of the soldiers ran past her. She collided against the arachnid warriors with her shield, sending a dozen of them stumbling to the ground, and then twisted into a whirlwind of annihilating darkness, her sword slicing through carapace armor, flesh, and bone as if nothing could stop it. Black blood, severed limbs, and broken bodies covered the ground. Saint was an ascended devil now, and augmented by all 4 of Sunny's shadows. The broken oath received the same augmentation, seeping strength and vitality from her enemies. The graceful knight fought with stunning clarity and sublime skill, and yet that was not enough to explain why Saint was so deadly and devastating. The abominations were not weak. It was she who was too strong, too fast, and too tyrannical. A simple evolution of one class could not explain the difference.
A devil commands unnatural powers. That is what separates them from demons.
Sonny's thoughts were slow and tangled, but he remembered that much. What powers had Saint received?
Might as well take a look.
It was not like Sonny could be of much use currently. He lingered for a few moments, staring at the fearsome battle that was taking place merely 24 meters or so away from him. Saint was holding back the whole mob of nightmare creatures by herself now. He did not know how long she would last, or whether the abominations would flow past the slaughtering devil to escape into the city. If they did, he would be the first one to die. Sonny gathered his thoughts and activated the healing property of the dying wish first. That, at least, did not demand any essence, or maybe slowly accumulated it with each kill, creating a hidden reserve. The main effect of the enchantment had been deactivated long ago. A wave of healing energy spread through his body, repairing the damage done to it and lessening the pain. He was still weak, muddled, and suffering, though. Whatever touching the gate had done to him seemed to be more than a mere physical wound.
Whatever.
Next, Sonny summoned Nightmare. He did not send the Black Stallion to join the battle yet, ordering him to stand guard above his master. Somewhat satisfied with these measures, Sonny glanced at Saint again and summoned the runes.
What the hell am I doing?
Indeed, the wall of the city was breached. A menacing nightmare gate was towering above him, and not too far away, a furious conflict was raging in the rabble of the staging area. And yet, Sonny was staring at the runes that shimmered brightly in the air in front of him. His vision was a little blurry, but the runes were clear and perfectly legible as if existing outside of reality, which they probably did.
Oh well.
Sonny needed a couple of minutes to recover anyway. He looked at the field of runes, searching for the names of his shadows. A new string of them replaced the old one.
Onyx Saint.
Onyx. That has a nice ring to it.
Marble Saint had turned into Onyx Saint. Was his marble shell going to evolve into the onyx shell as well? Once he transcended? Sonny would have loved to pursue that train of thought, but unfortunately, he couldn't. His thoughts were slow and erratic, refusing to consider anything too complicated. Giving up, he concentrated on the runes of Saint's name and started to read the descriptions.
Shadow, Onyx Saint. Shadow rank, Ascended. Shadow class, Devil. Shadow attributes, Battle Master. Stalwart, Ember of Divinity. Heart of Darkness.
Heart of Darkness. That's new.
Sonny glanced at the mass of attacking Arachnid warriors, catching a glimpse of Saint decapitating an especially menacing abomination with a swift slash of her black sword, then sending its body flying into the mob with a strike of her shield. Even before the rim of the shield connected with the creature's chest, the blade of the stone sword was already moving to deflect an incoming blow.
She's not dead yet.
He looked back to the runes.
Attribute description. A vestige of an ancient darkness dwells in this shadow's heart, granting her tenebrous powers.
So, Saint had not just destroyed the sphere of black stone in the tunnel, she had taken something from it. Sonny had expected as much. The spark of divinity was also gone, replaced by the ember of divinity. The light of divinity and true darkness now coexisted within Saint. Somehow, something was interesting about that fact, but Sonny, in his pitiful state, could not quite point to what. The sounds of the conflict grew louder and a little closer, forcing him to look past the runes nervously and then hurry up. The gate guardian could arrive at any moment. Sonny lowered his gaze.
Shadow attributes, weapon sage, underworld armament, mantle of darkness, blade of darkness.
2 new ones.
The name of the first ability was a bit familiar. He concentrated on it and read,
Ability, mantle of darkness. Ability description. Darkness embraces the shadow. When surrounded by darkness, and true darkness more so, her swiftness and might will increase, her wounds will be healed, and her heart will grow fuller.
Sonny blinked a couple of times.
Well, that explains how she is so powerful right now.
If there was one thing that Antarctica did not lack, it was darkness. Although the staging area was usually well lit, most tech nearby had been destroyed by the pulse of the opening gate. The Saint was wreathed in shadows. The physical augmentation of the mantle of darkness seemed to be a formidable one, and combined with the embrace of his 4 shadows, it produced a truly terrific result. What made him especially happy was that Saint would also be able to heal herself from now on, at least when surrounded by darkness. That alone was an incredible boon. The last part of the description spoke of her heart, but the rune could also mean soul. Sonny suspected that it alluded to both the true darkness dwelling in Saint's heart and her essence, or whatever it was that the shadow used instead of essence. The point was that its replenishment rate would be increased. These abilities were very similar to what the Black Knight had possessed, with one serious caveat. Unlike the fallen devil of the ruined cathedral, his own ascended devil seemed to possess dual affinity, both to the shadows and to the elemental darkness. Those were supposed to be mutually exclusive, but were not in her case. It seemed that Saint's nature as a shadow led to a curious result. His graceful knight paradoxically enjoyed the favor of both mundane and true darkness. Recalling how harrowing his journey through the underground tunnel had been, Sonny could not help but feel envious.
Interesting.
He finally turned his gaze to the second of the 2 new abilities.
Blade of darkness. Ability description. The true darkness dwelling in the shadow's heart can be summoned in the form of a fearsome weapon, as long as the shadow has mastered the use of that weapon. The blade of darkness can slay those of flesh and those of spirit. It never dulls, never falters, and never breaks. Alternatively, the darkness can be summoned to augment a mundane weapon.
Sonny smiled.
So, she fixed her sword herself in the end.
The Blade of Darkness was a truly powerful ability indeed. Since Saint was a battle master and a weapon sage, she could wield any weapon with superb proficiency, which meant that the true darkness she was a vessel of could take any form. The dark weapon would be as strong as Saint herself, growing stronger if Saint evolved again in the future. It was capable of killing both corporeal and incorporeal creatures. It could even be used to augment an existing weapon or a weapon-type memory, both making it more powerful and adding an elemental property to its attack. All of it was simply amazing. And when Sonny gathered enough memories, he flinched when something thundered, sending a strong shockwave through the ground. Looking past the runes, Sonny saw a massive shape emerging from the gate. The Guardian had arrived. Somewhere beyond the wall, Sky Tide was still fighting the devouring cloud. The wall had been breached, and he had no idea if the other irregulars still lived. Master Jet was nowhere to be seen, and probably...
No, don't think about it. She won't be so easily killed anyway.
And lastly, Saint was standing her ground against a whole swarm of dreadful nightmare creatures, surrounded by nothing but enemies and carnage. Even as powerful as she had become, the force arrayed against her was still dire and overwhelming. Sunny let out a tortured sigh.
No rest for the wicked.
Struggling against pain and sickening weakness, he staggered to his feet and grabbed Nightmare, terrified that he might fall again. Then, Sunny gazed at the gate and the tide of nightmare creatures flowing out of it. A strange countenance appeared on his face.
I might die, but I do require more memories, so I guess my greed is much greater than my fear.
With that, he groaned and hoisted himself on atop of his black steed. It was time to join the fight. Sunny realized that he would not be able to do a lot in this fight, but then again, he did not have to. Right now, his role was to support Saint and let his shadows do all the heavy lifting. Maybe that was how he was supposed to fight every battle, really. But sadly, fate rarely gave him such opportunities. In any case, there was one thing that he could do. Dismissing the sin of solace and the dying wish to get back a bit of essence, he summoned the shadow lantern instead. As soon as it manifested, Sunny tossed the lantern in the direction where the towering gate guardian, a monstrous arachnid wielding 6 weapons carved of bone, advanced on Saint. He did not have enough essence to sustain the divine memory's enchantment for long, but he did have enough to open its gate, unleashing a swarm of shadows onto the battlefield. The darkness enveloping it grew even deeper than it had been before. In the next moment, Sunny and Nightmare slammed into the crowd of abominations.
Crap!
The rest of the battle was a hazy mayhem of violence. Sunny struggled to remain atop his black steed, lamenting that there had not been enough time to saddle it. At some point, he simply slid to the ground, using Nightmare's body to shield himself from the enemies. Not trusting himself to wield a weapon that demanded strength in his weakened state, Sunny summoned the Moonlight Shard instead. A beautiful chalice of white jade appeared in his other hand. Submerging the narrow blade of the ghostly stiletto into the black liquid, he used it to strike at the cracks in the enemy armor and finish off those abominations that Nightmare had wounded with his fangs, horns, and steel hooves. At some point, other soldiers and awakened joined the fight. More nightmare creatures emerged from the gate, and more humans threw themselves into the meat grinder to stop the enemy from reaching the streets of the city. Their resistance was desperate and haphazard, but for now, at least, they held the tide of abominations back. Beyond the wall, obscured by the hideous rift of the Nightmare Gate, the sky was painted white by lightning. Sunny knew that they were going to win when the spell whispered into his ear, its voice drowning out the sounds of the battle.
You have slain a corrupted devil, Silkway Archon. Your shadow grows stronger.
Staggering back, he let out a relieved sigh and glanced in the direction where Saint had been fighting the gate guardian. The creature lay sprawled on the ground, its limbs severed, and its massive body cleaved apart. His shadow was standing above it, her black blade already seeking another target. Saint's armor was battered, and there were thin streams of fine ruby dust flowing from the breaches. However, wreathed in darkness, her body seemed to be healing already. Without ever slowing down, she shook the dark blood off her sword and dashed forward to face a new enemy. With the gate guardian slain, the scales of battle slowly started to tip in favor of humans. Sunny was not of much use, but with Saint and Nightmare rampaging amidst the abominations, dealing with them was not an insurmountable task. And then, almost abruptly, the battle was over. Sonny leaned tiredly on a piece of rubble, observing the scene of utter slaughter. His armor was bloodied, but his body was nearly devoid of wounds. Most had been healed by the dying wish, and the rest were repaired by the living stone. Having a magical shell reinforcing his skin was very handy. He still felt terrible, though. Around him, awakened and mundane soldiers were busy building improvised barricades around the gate. The first wave of abominations might have been destroyed, but more could emerge from the rift at any moment. A few of them suddenly froze, staring at a menacing black figure that had emerged from the darkness into the dim light. Saint's eyes burned with demonic crimson light, and her onyx armor was glistening, awash in the blood of the arachnid warriors. She looked both graceful and terrifying. One of the soldiers raised his rifle with trembling hands, but the other suddenly shouted, his eyes wide,
"Mongrel! It's Lord Mongrel!"
A hum of voices soon rose above the barricade.
"Mongrel is in Falcon Scott!"
"He killed the gate guardian! It was him!"
"It's clearly a she, you idiot, thank you. Lady Mongrel."
"We're saved!" Ignoring them, Saint passed between the invigorated soldiers indifferently. The broken oath long dismissed, she approached Sonny and froze, looming above him like a beautiful monument of darkness. Her ruby eyes stared at him intently. Unaccustomed to craning his neck to look at Saint, Sonny awkwardly cleared his throat.
Great job out there. You saved my skin."
She lingered for a few moments, slowly raising her hand, and poked him in the cheek with a finger. Then Saint tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. Her ruby eyes betrayed a hint of some unknown emotion, making Sonny blink.
What is happening?
Without saying anything, of course, the taciturn shadow then took a step back and turned away, looking at the gate. However, she seemed strangely pleased. Sonny blinked a few more times, then rubbed his cheek.
All right.
Was it because of the marble shell? He shook his head, knowing that there was no time to waste pondering the weird occurrence. Maybe he imagined the whole thing.
Anyway, I have to go. Stay here in case more nightmare creatures emerge, and don't let any of them escape into the city. I'll leave Nightmare with you.
Sonny had to find out if the battle against the devouring cloud was over, whether more gates had opened within the city, how his men were doing. Most importantly, he had to find Master Jet. Leaving the gloomy shadow with Saint, he wrapped the other three around his body, grimaced, and started walking. Even though there were no physical wounds on his body, Sonny still felt hurt. Every step was a struggle, but what else was new? Whispering quiet curses, he summoned the cruel sight to use as a walking stick and headed deeper into the staging area. Sonny did not have to wander the stretch of the staging area that had been ruined by the destruction of the wall for long. It was a mess, with broken prefab buildings laying scattered and broken, buried under piles of alloy debris. Finding anyone here would have been a challenge. Before he allowed himself to drown in dark thoughts, however, a familiar black bird appeared from above and landed on a bent steel beam protruding from the ground nearby. The crow waved its wings, clearly agitated, and cawed.
Jet! Jet!
Sonny let out a shaky breath, feeling a lot of relief. If the echo was still here, Soul Reaper couldn't be dead. He took a step toward the bird and asked,
"Where is she?"
Instead of answering, the crow flew away, landed on a communication relay a dozen meters away, and looked back expectantly. In this way, the echo led Sonny to Master Jet. After finding her, Sonny remained silent for a few moments. Then he coughed.
Well, that was not what I expected to see.
Jet was hanging upside down, her body caught in the jagged mess of torn alloy beams. One of them was piercing her abdomen like a hook, and her arm was caught between two others. Despite the ghastly situation, there was a calm and slightly annoyed expression on Soul Reaper's face.
Yeah, well, care to help me get down? I can do it myself, of course, but I would prefer my insides to remain on the inside for a little bit longer.
She could probably free herself. Simple alloy would not have held back a master for long. But with how thoroughly trapped Jet was, ripping herself off the hook would have probably exacerbated her wounds by a lot. Not everyone had the lineage of a tenacious daemon to help them recover and skin as hard as enchanted marble. Sunny studied the tangled mess of alloy beams, then floated up with the help of the dark wing and carefully pulled Master Jet off the jagged hook. With a quiet hiss, she slid off the bloodied alloy and fell, landing softly on her feet.
Ah, damn it.
Jet clutched her abdomen with a grimace and then slowly straightened. Sunny landed nearby and looked at her with concern.
Are you going to be all right?
Instead of answering, Soul Reaper spat a mouthful of blood, then looked at him with a dark smile. Her teeth were all painted red, so the smile was not very reassuring.
Don't worry about it. I am a very sturdy girl. Whatever. The point is, it will be as good as new in a couple of days, even without a healer.
Sunny scratched the back of his head, then hesitated for a few moments. Eventually he said,
I was afraid that you died.
Master Jet laughed, then winced and clutched her wound tighter.
Died? That's the last thing you should be afraid of. Believe me, Sunny, I won't die on this godforsaken continent. It's impossible.
He shook his head at her bravado, then sighed.
All right. Do you want me to tell you how the battle went?
Soul Reaper waved her hand.
Crow saw it. Good job handling the gate. I'm a bit embarrassed that I wasn't there to help. Several others opened either near or within the city. All of them were contained. It's just that this particular one was an unpleasant surprise. The devouring cloud also seems to have retreated for now.
She frowned.
You observed it too, right?
Sunny nodded with a dark expression.
A new tyrant must have risen from within the swarm. Those damned leeches were acting too purposefully.
Master Jet used his shoulder for support and pulled him forward. They slowly walked through the ruins of the staging area, looking like two cripples.
Yeah, that is why the devouring cloud pulled away before being destroyed. It will probably be back later.
Sunny closed his eyes for a moment.
Gods, there are so many priority targets converging on the city. I hoped that we would destroy at least one today.
He glanced at Jet, his eyes tired.
So, what do we do now?
She simply shrugged.
Go find our people. Rest, recover. Prepare to repeat the whole thing tomorrow.
Indeed, what else was there to do? Life was a constant struggle. Since the wall was broken now, they had to find an elevator that would take them to the proper side of the breach. Even worse, the pulse of the gate had destroyed a lot of fine machinery, so finding a working platform was not easy. Eventually, however, they made it to the top of the defensive barrier and returned to the position of the irregulars. The first one they saw was Winter, who sat tiredly on the alloy surface of the battlement, her eyes hidden once again behind the sunglasses. A thin crack ran through one of the lenses. Hearing their steps, she turned her head slightly. A pale smile appeared on her face.
The heroes return. You two look like crap.
Master Jet scoffed, which caused her to wince once again.
Thanks for the compliment.
Sunny helped her sit down, then looked around, searching for his cohort. Noticing the towering figure of Dorn a dozen or so meters away, he breathed out heavily with relief and asked, his voice almost devoid of tension.
So, how did it go? Do we have any casualties?
Winter did not respond, prompting him to look down. Her face was uncharacteristically somber. Sonny felt something cold brush against his heart.
What?
The ascended archer sighed, then looked down. About that. I'm sorry, Sonny. Things were a bit chaotic back there. He remained motionless for a while, then turned away and silently headed toward where he had seen Dorn. As Sonny approached, he mentally counted. Dorn, Belle, Luster, Kim, Samara. When he reached the cohort, they turned to him, their faces pale and grim. Kim's eyes were glistening, and she avoided looking directly at him. Luster was the first one to speak, his tone subdued.
Captain,
Sonny cut him off.
Show me.
They stepped aside, revealing the figure of Quentin, who was laying on the cold alloy with his eyes closed. Sonny discovered himself taking a few steps forward and kneeling beside the gallant healer. His face was calm, and his body seemed untouched except for a shallow wound on the side of his head. His chest was rising and falling, which meant that Quentin was still alive. He had not been killed. He had just lost consciousness. However, it did not matter. Sonny closed his eyes. Quentin had lost consciousness near an active gate, which meant that his soul was stolen away by the call. He had been thrown into an unexplored, dire region of the dream realm, surrounded by numerous nightmare creatures and abominations so vile that words could not describe them. His only chance of survival was to fight his way to a seed, challenge it, and conquer the second nightmare. Alone. For all intents and purposes, Quentin was already dead. A few hours later, Sonny discovered himself alone in the Rhino. The area surrounding the military barracks was quiet, and the interior of the APC was dark. He sat on his bed, unmoving, his eyes like two pools of darkness. He was cold.
It is what it is.
War was like that. People died all the time. Sonny had sent many to their deaths himself. He was not new to losing soldiers, and yet he was weak. His body and soul were both in pain because of the brush with the nightmare gate, but somehow his heart hurt much worse. There was a lot for him to do, feeding Saint, continuing his attempts to weave a memory from the Devil's Needle. However, Sonny felt unwilling to move, or maybe incapable. He just sat silently and stared into the darkness. After some time, his communicator lit up. He gazed at it, then slowly brought the screen to his face. There was a new message from Rain. Rain.
Hey, Sonny. It is really hard to imagine that it is winter in Antarctica, and that the night there lasts for many months. And that aurora thing you described, I looked up on the network, and wow, it's so pretty. There's nothing like that in NQSC. Well, you know, we can hardly even see stars here because of the light pollution and the air being full of dust. However, the weather is warm and the nights are short, so I won't complain. You stay warm too. Nothing really interesting happened to me. Did anything interesting happen to you? How are you doing? I hope everything is all right.
Sonny remained motionless for a while, staring at the screen. Then he closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and started writing a response. Sonny.
Hey, Rain. Lots of interesting things happened to me, of course. I am one of the most interesting people in two whole worlds, after all. Didn't you know? I am doing great, too. I mean, all things considered. Since I am such a dashing and heroic figure, people go around giving me sandwiches, medals, and the like. So,
Sonny paused for a few seconds, then briefly wiped his eyes, and continued.
Life is pretty sweet. Hold on, you wretches!
A mass of nightmare creatures was advancing through a city street, mere meters away from slamming into a makeshift barricade formed by the hulking frames of firing MWPs. The surface of the road was broken and melted, and the ruins of the surrounding buildings were enveloped in flames. Leaping off a slowly collapsing roof, Sonny plummeted down and landed between the abominations. The emerald blade of the Sin of Solace moved, sending fountains of blood into the air. He dashed sideways, dodging a stream of bullets, and groaned. It was already the second week of the siege, but the damage done to his body and soul by the Nightmare Gate was slow to heal. Sonny shrugged off the pain and called upon the shadows, erecting a black wall of them to block off the street.
Flamethrowers!
The pilots of the MWPs did not stop firing their mass drivers, but long streams of orange-red fire shot from their wrists over the wall. Sonny danced between the flames, circulating his energy to activate the underworld armament. The effect of the memory of fire was enhanced, elevating his elemental resistance even higher. The nightmare creatures were not that lucky. While he dealt with the head of the swarm, Bell and Dorn attacked its tail from the flanks. A sharp sword and a heavy sledgehammer made short work of the frenzied abominations, and at the same time, charged tungsten rounds flashed from a nearby dormitory tower, slaying the most dangerous targets without fail. Caught between the hammer and the anvil, the swarm swiftly melted. The last one to die was a hideous creature with hardy scales covering its reptilian body. Sonny simply struck the abomination with the edge of his palm, turning it as heavy as a boulder and as hard as a stone. The reptile's skull shattered, disintegrating into a disgusting rain of blood and bone. Even before the heavy body touched the ground, the spell was already whispering.
You have slain an awakened monster, Scaled Prowler. You've received a memory.
His eyes glinted.
Another memory.
Wiping his hand with a revolted expression, Sonny looked around. Lester and Kim appeared on a nearby roof, signaling that none of the creatures escaped. He let out a sigh of relief. The situation was under control. After the ill-fated battle with the devouring cloud, the pressure on the defenders of Falcon Scott had steadily increased. The fact that there was a giant breach in the wall did not help things one bit. Eventually, the defensive barrier had been broken through in 2 more places, forcing the First Army to evacuate civilians deeper into the city and create a secondary ring of defense on the empty streets. The topography of the siege was not simple anymore. Humans still held the wall, deflecting most of the nightmare creatures from its height, but now, various sections of the Great Barrier were separated, almost turning into independent fortresses. A detachment of soldiers was tasked with defending the breaches from the ground. They mostly managed to prevent the nightmare creatures from breaking through the barricades into the city, even if the rate of casualties among the ground crews was much higher. However, some monstrosities still reached the streets from time to time. Sonny had just dealt with one of these invading swarms.
That's the 4th one today. Not a good sign.
He bent in a painful hacking fit, feeling a sickening weakness permeate his body once again. After a while, the coughing subsided, and Sonny remained motionless for a few moments, breathing hoarsely and waiting for the weakness to subside. Soon, it was gone, and all that remained was a gnawing pain in his chest.
Damnation.
He straightened and glanced at his people, who were making their way through the burning carnage of the destroyed city street. Once they reached him, everyone except Samara, who was still in her sniper nest on top of the empty dormitory tower, Sonny glanced at Kim and asked,
Any updates from Soul Reaper?
She nodded.
Yes, sir. Master Dale pushed the enemy back, reclaiming control over Breach C. We are ordered to stand down and rest. Our next shift starts in 16 hours.
Sonny tiredly rubbed his face.
16 hours, huh? Either Army Command is feeling generous, or they expect real trouble tomorrow. Well, all the more reason to make sure that we're fresh and full of essence. Signal Sam to come down and retreat to the barracks.
He studied his soldiers for a moment, making sure that none of them was wounded. Without a healer in the cohort, recovering between battles had become somewhat tricky. It demanded outside help, at least. Fortunately, the members of the cohort were unscathed. He nodded, letting them go, and turned around. The MWPs stood motionless, the incandescent barrels of their guns glowing in the gloom. The coolant liquid was dripping down, evaporating into clouds of haze. Some pilots had opened the cockpits, sitting on the doors of the hatches with tired expressions on their faces. They would retreat inside soon, chased back into the overheated war machines by smoke and the smell of charred corpses. But for now, at least, the soldiers were enjoying the short moment of respite in the coldness of the never-ending night. Noticing Sonny, one of the pilots raised a hand and made it into a fist. Sonny returned the stalwart salute and then silently walked away. A few minutes later, he stumbled, grabbing a wall in a dark and isolated alley. The divine sword of solace whispered, mocking him. But it was not too hard to suppress the hateful voice these days. Sonny rested for a few moments and then took a step back. Saint emerged from the shadows, as silent and menacing as ever. Nightmare joined her, moonlight glinting on his adamantine horns. Sonny sighed and summoned the overpriced saddle. Fastening its straps on the black stallion, he glanced at the two shadows and said,
"You know what to do. I'll return in 16 hours. Be cautious today. Chances are we'll have to go all out tomorrow."
Saint nodded indifferently, then mounted the dark destrier and outstretched a hand. Sonny placed the hilt of the divine sword of solace into it, at the same time sending two of his phantoms forth. Then he watched the taciturn knight leave as she headed in the direction of the wall. These days, the two of them work in shifts. If the Devil of Antarctica was not defending Falcon Scott, the Guardian Angel of Antarctica did. Millions of people had already been evacuated from the doomed city, but millions more remained. The siege capital could not be allowed to fall yet. Sonny coughed some more, uttered a quiet curse, and walked in the opposite direction of where Saint had left. As he walked through the empty streets, Sonny breathed in the cold winter air and tried to calm his wildly beating heart. He should not have been that fatigued, but he was. The strange ailment tormenting him had become less severe in the last couple of days. However, it was not gone yet.
Curse it all.
Sonny grimaced, then noticed a group of soldiers ahead and forced himself to put on the mask of a confident commander. Mundane humans looked up to masters, and if they saw one walking around with hollowed eyes and a troubled expression, their morale would suffer. He had never thought that being preoccupied with concerns about people's morale would become something he bothered with, yet here he was. As Sonny walked closer, he heard bits and pieces of their conversation.
"I saw Mongrel fight yesterday. God, he is truly a fiend. My whole unit would be dead if not for him. I wish I could thank the man, but he is not from the First Army. Maybe he's a legacy from a local Antarctica clan."
No, haven't you heard the rumors? Mongrel is the master of the First Irregular Company. The Devil.
You lost your damn mind, fool. Mongrel is like 2 meters tall, while Master Sunless is on the shorter side. Believe me, I saw them side by side the day the wall was first breached. Also, Mongrel is a woman.
Yeah, I saw it too. She even caressed his cheek. Well, more like poked it. Wait, do you guys think something's going on between them?
You are all idiots. Mongrel is several people.
Usually, hearing such conversations amused Sonny, but this time he remained detached and indifferent. The soldiers grew silent when he approached, straightened, and then bowed respectfully. He nodded at them in passing and continued on his way uncaring.
But that reminds me.
Sonny summoned the runes and glanced at the description of Saint.
Shadow fragments, 185 out of 200.
So close.
With the two memories he received today, one from an awakened monster, the other from a fallen beast, The counter would increase by 2 fragments, bringing it to 187. From here, he only needed 13 more for Saint to transcend. He was somewhat pressed for time, but also had a few of his memories that could be sacrificed to accelerate the process. Things were still going according to plan.
It's the weaving that is the problem. I feel like I am almost there, but the Midnight Shard still giving me trouble. Too risky.
Sunny pondered the intricacies of the spell weave, grimacing when the thundering clamor of the distant battle grew especially loud and made it harder to think. Gradually, the noise became quieter, although it never went away entirely. Sunny pressed through the barricades, left the secondary defense ring, and entered the crowded streets of Falcon Scott. Even though numerous civilians had to be relocated deeper into the city, the signs of overpopulation were not as dire as one could have expected. The naval convoy had been busy ferrying the refugees across the strait, after all. By now, somewhere around 80 million people had already been transported to the relative, extremely so, safety of eastern Antarctica. It almost looked as though Army Command's plan was working. Seeing actual proof that all his efforts were not in vain made Sunny feel a little better. Up ahead, a crowd of refugees was waiting in line to receive rations. He studied it for a moment, noticing a familiar figure handing out packs of synth paste at the front. Sunny smiled a little, then headed in that direction. As he walked closer, the person growled without looking up.
You better not be cutting the line,
Then Beth looked up and blinked a couple of times.
Oh, Sunny, what are you doing here?
He shrugged.
On my way back from the wall.
She called one of the other volunteers to switch with her, then led him aside to a humming heat projector. Beth stopped in front of it, shivering and rubbing her hands together.
How was your day?
Sunny remained silent for a bit, not knowing how to answer.
Hectic.
The young woman peeked at him and scoffed.
A man of few words, are you now?
Sunny dismissed again.
How is the old man? Did you guys receive placement in the queue yet?
Beth sighed.
No. People say that another ship went down in the strait. So many placements were postponed again. As for the professor, he's doing fine. The Army got him consulting on how to upgrade the communication array, so he has something to do at least.
She looked at him questioningly.
Are you coming over today?
Sunny hesitated, then slowly shook his head.
No. There's a lot that I have to do. Also, my gut tells me that tomorrow will be a tough day. Your dormitory is away from the wall, but still, be careful. Well, you know the drill.
The young woman turned back to the heat projector.
Yeah.
Then she suddenly opened the bag hanging over her shoulder, scrounged in it, and took out a tube of synth paste.
Here, you forgot this last time.
Sunny blinked a couple of times.
I did not forget it. I left it for you because I know the supply chain is in shambles.
Beth tilted her head and looked at him fiercely.
You think I can't get us some synth paste?
Sunny laughed.
I mean, if you are so principled, then why are you not returning 2 cans of coffee I left in your dormitory as well?
The young woman looked down, her cheeks turning slightly red.
What cans of coffee? I haven't seen anything of the sort.
Sunny nodded a couple of times and gently pushed the synth paste away.
Okay. Anyway, I'll try to drop by soon. If you do find that coffee, please enjoy it.
He bid farewell to Beth, an awkward farewell, and strolled away, feeling slightly refreshed. Here in the city proper, public transportation was still functioning. Military vehicles were rolling down the streets as well. It did not take him long to reach the barracks. Entering the Rhino, Sunny gazed around, his gaze pausing on one of the closed sleeping pods. Then, he strolled to the back of the APC, hauled the Devil's Needle from its place on the floor of the armory, and sighed.
15 hours left, but I probably should sleep for at least a couple.
Shaking his head, he got to work. Sonny did not recall falling asleep, but he was woken up by someone banging on the hatch of the Rhino. Sitting up, he looked around and realized that he must have passed out while studying the weave of the Midnight Shard. The austere Tachi was still laying on the holographic table, glinting as if to mock him. He had almost solved the problem. That elusive element of the weave was almost isolated. But as someone banged on the hatch once again, making the massive APC shake a little, Sonny flinched, rubbed his face, and went to the hatch.
Coming? Who the hell?
He opened the hatch and froze, swallowing the rest of his irritated shout.
Oh, Master Jet. Good morning.
She glanced at him with amusement. Technically, it's evening. Go wipe the drool off your face and come out, Sonny. We've been summoned to attend a meeting. He frowned, then threw an angry look at the gloomy shadow which was hiding in the darkness not too far away. The bastard was supposed to warn him if anything approached, protecting Sonny from a sudden attack or from embarrassing himself, in theory. The shadow shrugged innocently and looked away. Shaking his head, Sonny returned inside and quickly washed his face. A couple of minutes later, he left the APC and closed the hatch behind him. Since Soul Reaper mentioned that he had to come out, they were most likely heading for the complex that the local branch of the 1st Army Command used as headquarters. It was only a short distance from the barracks. Indeed, Jet walked in that direction, with Sonny following as he looked around with sleepy eyes. A few moments later, he asked,
"What is the meeting about?"
She shrugged. "We'll find out. All I know is that Whitefeather wants to see us."
Whitefeather, huh?
The two of them made their way to the army headquarters, but then walked past it, approaching a heavily fortified compound instead. Winter and Dale were already waiting for them near the gates, looking as ragged and fatigued as Sonny. He greeted them.
"I heard you retook Breach C yesterday. Must have been a tough fight."
Not really. We still hold both sections of the wall above the breach, so all I had to do was persuade the abominations to stay put until the garrison forces shredded them with their ranged weapons.
He remained silent for a moment, and then added,
"Things would have been much worse if they were better climbers, though."
Sonny nodded somberly. Together they entered the compound and were led to a spacious room on one of the underground levels. There, two people were waiting for them. Master Roan was standing in front of a false window, studying the projected image of the night sky. His face was painted ghostly green by the ethereal tapestry of the swirling aurora. Saint Tyrus was motionless, sitting in an imposing chair with her back held straight. Sonny had not seen Sky Tide in a while, at least in her human form. She looked battered. Her elegant armor was bent and broken, white steel marred by dried blood. Her hair, which had once fallen like a cascade of pale gold, now looked lifeless and bleak. Her dazzlingly beautiful face was pale, blackened by ugly bruises. It seemed that holding the winter beast back was taking a toll on the transcendent of the Whitefeather clan. Her expression was still aloof and stern, however, and her amber eyes burned with the same fierce, cold resolve. Master Roan turned at the sound of the steps.
"Ah, Ascended Jet, Ascended Winter, Ascended Dale, Sunless. Welcome. Sorry for the sudden invitation."
Sonny noticed black circles under the handsome man's eyes. Roan was acting uncharacteristically subdued, his usual charisma gone. That did not bode well. Master Jet waved a hand. "War waits for no one. What did you want to discuss?
Roan smiled slightly. Straight to business. Well, it is for the best. There is not much time to prepare.
He walked away from the false window and stopped beside Skytide, then gestured at the holographic projection in front of them. On it, the map of the surrounding area disappeared, replaced by the blurry image of a grotesque creature. Leathery wings, lean body with 6 segmented legs, a tail that ended with a long, jagged stinger, and 3 long necks, each ending in a harrowing circular maw. The abominations looked like a mix between a wyvern, a worm, and a scorpion. It was large, formidable, and utterly hideous.
Our scouts have confirmed that the devouring cloud has produced a new tyrant, a fallen one, but still a dire threat to the survival of the city. The creature mostly hides within the swarm, controlling it from behind.
Winter cursed. Yeah, we figured as much after the last time.
Master Roan slowly nodded. It is our priority to eliminate the tyrant. The devouring cloud will descend on Falcon Scott today. You will be the blade to strike its puppeteer down.
The irregulars glanced at each other. After a short pause, Jet asked, "How do you know that the swarm will come?" Roan scowled slightly, but before he could answer, St. Tyrus suddenly spoke. "Because our clan will lure it here." The 4 ascended grew silent, looking at her incredulously. Skytide met their gazes with a calm expression, her face as motionless as ever. Somewhat stunned by that confession, Sunny asked, "Why the hell would you do that?" Skytide inhaled deeply, then turned away. "Goliath draws near. We have to eradicate other threats before he comes. If they attack together, you can imagine the devastation. The window of opportunity grows narrower with each day, so we can't passively wait for the devouring cloud to return anymore. So Roan and the other awakened warriors of my clan will lure it here. Today." She glanced at the irregulars, studied them for a few moments, and then added, "Ascended Winter will contain the swarm. Roan will bring the tyrant down. The 3 of you will make sure that the creature never takes flight again. That is the battle plan." Sunny smiled darkly. "What if Winter fails to hold back the swarm? What if Roan fails to isolate the tyrant? What if the 3 of us fail to kill it in time?" St. Tyrus gazed at him for a while, her amber eyes both beautiful and cold. Then she uttered simply, "Don't fail." Master Jet sighed, shaking her head. She patted Sunny on the shoulder and walked around the projection of the fallen tyrant. "All right, I like that plan. Let's discuss the details." The discussion did not take long. Soon the irregulars uttered their goodbyes to Skytide and headed to the exit, each in a hurry to prepare for the coming battle. Sunny, however, stayed back after a bit of hesitation. When there were only 3 of them left in the room, Skytide, Roan, and him, Sunny peeked at the battered transcendent with a complicated expression. After a few moments, he said, "You must have heard that another of Valor's saints was killed." St. Tyrus gaped at him silently, not saying anything. Sunny tilted his head a little. "You and I have helped that monster escape from the Night Temple. If it weren't for you, I would have been dead, and Mordred would have still been contained. Do you regret saving me now that he is out there, slaughtering people?" Skytide remained motionless for a bit, then shook her head. "No." A pale smile appeared on Sunny's face. "Why?" She sighed,
Years ago, when the young Prince of War came to the Chained Isles, I offered him my hospitality. Like any other awakened, he was under my protection, roaming the dream realm in search of something, much like you did. When Valor plotted to ambush and eliminate him, I followed orders and did nothing to prevent it. I have carried the shame of that wrongdoing ever since. He pondered her words for a few moments.
They had a very good reason to get rid of him, though. That guy is like a nightmare creature. There's not much human left in him.
Saint Tyrus looked him in the eye, her beautiful face expressionless. Is it worth it? To do the wrong thing for the right reason? No. Life is unpredictable, and the future is unclear. All we can strive for is to act according to our principles and do what we consider right. The rest doesn't matter. Sunny looked around, his gaze lingering on the traces of dried blood on Skytide's armor. His eyes turned dark.
Doing the right thing is what got you and your clan banished to this hellhole.
She gazed at the false window, where the image of the night sky was projected. A full moon was shining on its velvet expanse, surrounded by the lights of the ghostly aurora. A hint of some deep, hidden emotion appeared on Skytide's beautiful face. After a while, she said, "The sky is suffocating here, but other than that, this is precisely where I wanted to be." Sunny lingered for a few moments, then bowed slightly to Master Roan, and silently strode away. He had to prepare for battle. Standing on the battlement and peering into the cold darkness beyond, Sunny had a contemplative expression on his face. The wind smelled of snow as it played with his black hair, which had grown a bit too long by now. Pale moonlight permeated the air, failing to reach the ravaged land. Winter and Dale were sitting nearby, leaning on the alloy parapet of the wall and sharing a flask. The two captains seemed calm, one in her usual relaxed manner, the other solemn and staid. As the contents of the flask ran out, Winter sighed and looked at Sunny. "You seem terribly serious today." He lingered for a moment, then shrugged.
"Just thinking about stuff."
She did not press, content to rest with her eyes hidden behind the cracked sunglasses. Sunny felt strangely thoughtful after his conversation with Saint Tyrus. He was not sure that he agreed with her uncompromising views, but there was one thing Skytide had said that was unquestionably true. Life was, indeed, unpredictable. Take his own relationship with the Steely Saint. Sunny did not know Saint Tyrus very well or share any of her principles, but he found himself respecting the stern transcendent a great deal. He liked Master Roan, too. The three of them even shared some history. Several years ago, Sunny had held nothing but contempt toward legacies. He had regarded them as arrogant, dangerous, and hateful people. Someone who did not deserve the unfair privileges bestowed upon them by nothing except for birthright. Who would have thought that he would come to value and admire some of them one day? Take Cassia, too. When she surrendered his secret to Nephis on the Forgotten Shore, Sunny had thought that it was the darkest moment of his life. And yet, if she had not made that choice, he would have stayed behind, a sleeper. Sunny had no way of knowing if he would have survived the same journey Changing Star had. What he did know, though, was that Rain would have been dead if not for his return. If Sunny had not been there to hold back the tide of nightmare creatures advancing on her school, his sister would have been ripped apart by the rampaging abominations. There were too many instances like that to count. Life
was unpredictable, and no one could predict the twists and turns of fate. Except for Weaver, perhaps. Even oracles like Cassia could only see glimpses of it, blind to the context and powerless to change the outcome. So where did it leave him?
The same place where I started, I guess.
An ignorant fool struggling against something he could not even comprehend. Antarctica, at least, was straightforward. With a sigh, Sonny moved strands of hair away from his eyes and sat down near Winter and Dale. His hands were aching for a simple fight.
How much more do we have to wait, damn it?
Dale peeked at him with a smile so faint that it was almost non-existent.
Rest while you can. You'll be regretting that this calm did not last longer very soon.
Sonny grimaced and looked away, staring at a squad of soldiers that marched by. The soldiers were acting a bit strange, sticking painstakingly to the better illuminated parts of the battlement and hastening their steps in the darker areas. Their faces were glum and nervous. He frowned.
What's up with them?
Winter turned her head slightly, studying the soldiers.
Huh? Haven't you heard the rumors?
Sonny thought for a moment, then shook his head.
What rumors?
The ascended archer chuckled.
You should really come out of your APC more often, you know? Well, anyway, there are a lot of scary stories spreading among the refugees these days. One more nonsensical than the others. The latest story is that there is a shadow wraith stalking the city, hiding somewhere in the darkness. Apparently it lures people away from the light, never to be seen again.
She took a deep breath and then added in a more somber tone.
Although, maybe there's some truth to that one. Soldiers are not usually easily spooked, but as you can see, they are on edge. Too many disappearances lately.
Sonny frowned. In a city of 200 million, there were bound to be some disappearances, especially with the nightmare spell infecting people left and right. However, he felt concerned. A shadow wraith. That was right up his alley, no? There could also be a different explanation for the increased number of disappearances. The terror of LO-49 was known to start its meals in just that manner. In any case, he sensed some unease.
A shadow creature. I don't know. They are extremely rare. I only ever met one in the wild, and even that was inside a nightmare. I'm not sure if any survived to this day.
Well, there was that one little bastard who got a chunk of his flesh. Did scavengers need to devour a corpse to inherit new abilities? Or would any piece of flesh suffice? What were the chances of the vile gremlin developing an affinity to shadows? Dale simply shrugged.
If there is something strange going on, Army Command should already be investigating. Since we aren't officially informed, either the rumors are baseless, or the incidents are not serious enough to inform the irregulars. Regardless, we should concentrate on the task at hand.
As if on cue, there was the sound of light steps, and Master Jet approached from further along the wall. The members of her cohort, now fewer than before, followed. She looked around briefly, then said, I've just received the word. Roan and his people are approaching. The devouring cloud is in a frenzy. I do not know what they did, but it worked. Prepare yourself. The rest of the defending forces seemed to have got the same news. All along the southern stretch of the wall, a flurry of activity commenced. Soldiers were checking their weapons for the last time. Awakened were summoning their memories. Railgun crews were hurriedly finishing maintenance procedures and hauling crates of tungsten rounds closer to the feeding mechanisms. Thousands of turrets came alive, turning their twin barrels toward the sky. Sunny rose and stretched, breathing in the cold winter air. Looking at the members of his cohort, he grinned.
Same arrangement as last time. Hopefully... No. Actually, never mind. I'm not saying it aloud. Just do well, and do not die.
The distant horizon soon turned hazy with a myriad of flying horrors. The scene was eerily familiar. The only difference from their last attempt to destroy the devouring cloud was that today, the landscape was illuminated by pale moonlight, and that there were a few fewer irregulars standing watch on the wall. Sunny silently observed Winter, who was preparing to unleash hell. Once again, she was surrounded by several mysterious memories. Once again, a cohort of awakened used their aspects to augment her powers. He stood several meters away in the company of Master Jet and Dale. None of the three were going to participate in the ranged barrage, conserving their potency for the sortie to hunt down and kill the tyrant. The atmosphere was tense, but not as oppressive as the first battle against the harrowing swarm. On the alloy battlement in front of them, a man in leather armor was sitting with his eyes closed, meditating. The falling snowflakes swirled in strange ways around him, as if following invisible paths. He was one of Dale's awakened, and someone whom Sunny knew. The man possessed the ability to open stable spatial rifts, and had been one of the candidates he had considered when assembling the cohort. Since no one knew where the tyrant was going to fall after having its wings cut by Roan, the strike team would need to get around the perimeter of the wall fast. If Roan succeeded.
Guards!
Hearing Dale's whisper, Sunny looked south and saw arcs of thunderbolts dancing deep within the distant swarm. His face paled a little.
They're inside it?
It seemed that Roan and the awakened of the Whitefeather clan were leading the devouring cloud to the city with the smell of their blood. Suddenly, the task of slaying the tyrant of the swarm seemed even heavier than before.
So what? Nothing changed.
Sunny had some contingencies at least. Saint and Nightmare were currently guarding one of the breaches in the wall. Should the three masters prove inadequate, his shadows would help them reach and kill the broodmother of the swarm. Or was it a father?
Who cares?
Sunny clenched his fists and watched as the horde of flying horrors swiftly drew closer to Falcon Scott. Soon the city defense systems opened fire once again, and so did Winter. The mass of brood beasts obscured the sky, drowning out the light of the moon. In front of the swarm, a horde of nightmare creatures moved, seemingly as desperate to escape from it as humans would be. Caught between the devouring cloud and the wall of Falcon Scott, they launched themselves at the alloy barrier, dying in scores under the barrage of bullets and arrows. Somehow, today's battle felt more frenzied, more dire. Shrieks and howls of abominations fused with human shouts, all disappearing into the rustle of countless leathery wings. A dark expression appeared on Soul Reaper's face. Gripping her glaive, she said,
Hold. Wait for the signal.
At the moment, everything depended on Roan and his awakened. They had to lure the tyrant forward and bring it to the ground so that the three elite ascended of the irregular company could sort it out, find it, and finish the creature off once and for all before it escaped. Seconds passed, then minutes, but the promised indication was not coming. Sunny felt his nerves reaching a breaking point when a swift shadow suddenly fell from the sky. It was not a brooding beast, however. Instead, it was a young awakened woman wearing the white colors of her clan, her armor decorated with beautiful etchings of hawk feathers and marred with blood. Sunny remembered seeing her several times in the sanctuary, back when Skytide had still ruled over the chained isles. The young woman landed gracelessly on the battlement and staggered, barely keeping her balance. Then, she looked around, took a step toward Master Jet, and stumbled. Dale caught and supported her, his face grim. Soul Reaper frowned.
What happened to sending us a signal? Where's the tyrant?
The young woman gritted her teeth and then said hoarsely, her voice full of fire,
Two. There's two of them.
It took a few seconds for her words to register. Sunny cursed and observed the dark mass of the swarm that obscured the sky.
2 tyrants? How does it make any sense?
Jet's face twitched. She stared at the young woman for a moment, then asked evenly,
So, where are they?
The legacy leaned on Dale and turned slightly to face the devouring cloud.
The signal.
As if answering her words, 2 radiant spheres of light suddenly appeared in the distance, tearing through the darkness. One deep within the swarm, across the killing field. The other, unexpectedly, was even further away. But it was a different direction. To the west of the city, near the ocean. The devouring cloud had barely reached there. Her job done, the young woman from the White Feather let out a sigh and slumped, losing consciousness. Dale barked something, and one of his men, most likely the healer, took her off his hands. The 3 masters briefly glanced at each other. Master Jet uttered a swear that would have made Sunny blush if the situation was slightly less dire, and then smiled darkly.
I guess we're going to have to split up.
She observed between the distant spheres of light, then sighed and moved her shoulders as if to loosen the muscles.
I'll take the southern one. Sunny, Night, you 2 go west and deal with the second tyrant. Get it done.
Sunny blinked a couple of times, then took a step forward.
But...
She raised a hand, stopping him.
That's an order. No time to waste.
With that, Jet began summoning a memory. Before the whirlwind of white sparks even manifested into reality, Soul Reaper was already moving, leaping over the parapet of the battlement to disappear into the haze of falling snow below. Sunny gritted his teeth. When he turned around, there was a shimmering portal in the air in front of him, leading to the point on the western wall not too distant from where the sphere of light still burned in the air. Dale was already heading toward it, his helmet weaving itself from light. Sunny followed. Before stepping into the spatial rift, however, he sent a mental command to Saint. Not a few seconds after Soul Reaper landed on the ravaged ground beyond the killing field, a dark rider leapt through the breach in the wall and followed. Stepping through the spatial rift felt no different from taking a mundane step. It was only a little bit disorienting. The sudden change of the landscape, the direction of the wind, the subtle shift in the tone of the firing armaments. For Sunny, it was especially so because he could also feel that the shadows around him were entirely different. However, there was no time to waste on being confused. Forcing himself to focus, he followed Dale to the edge of the wall and peered down. Far below, a stretch of land was flooded by attacking abominations, with brood beasts swarming above them. Behind those was the edge of a tall cliff that descended toward the shore. The dark expanse of the ocean stretched for as far as the eye could see, moonlight dancing on its restless black surface. The sphere of light was slowly growing dimmer as it burned somewhere above and beyond the cliff. Dale spoke, his voice sounding slightly muffled by the helmet.
We will have to find our way through.
Sunny nodded.
I'll clear the way. You follow.
The sin of Solus was already manifesting itself in his hand, and shadows wrapped around his body, filling him with resilience and strength. The marble shell was also augmented. Sunny lingered for a moment.
What about when we reach the tyrant? We can't allow it to escape, and with Master Jet gone...
The stalwart master shook his head.
I'll trap it, and us, within the barrier. Then, either the tyrant dies, or we do. No one will escape.
Sonny had already seen one of Dale's barriers, the one that allowed things to pass from within, but blocked everything coming from the outside. Today he would see the second one, which functioned in reverse. More than that, he was going to be trapped inside that barrier with a damned fallen tyrant. If they wanted to be sure of the result, there was no better way.
Great. I'll be going then. Come down in a few seconds.
Instead of summoning the Dark Wing, Sonny simply turned into a shadow, slid over the edge of the battlement, and swiftly glided down the surface of the wall. In a moment, he was already on the ground, emerging from the darkness, with the Jade Jian whistling through the air. By the time Dale landed behind him, using some sort of rope memory, half a dozen abominations were already bleeding on the ground. The defenders on that section of the wall had already received orders to support their sortie as well, shifting their fire to help the Ascended create a corridor through the mass of nightmare creatures. Granted, they were spread too thin between the devouring cloud and the abominations attacking the wall in a desperate attempt to escape from the swarm, so the results were modest. At least Sonny did not have to worry about catching a tungsten round in his back.
Goddamn great.
Sonny and Dale rushed forward, fighting their way through the tide of frenzied nightmare creatures. The stalwart master used his heater shield and heavy-flanged mace to crush and break the abominations, flinging their bodies out of the way. Sonny simply cut through them, rendering the hideous body with the jade blade of the Sin of Solace. However, there were just too many enemies to kill. Even Dale's plate armor easily shrugged off blow after blow, and Sonny could simply ignore most of the attacks that got through his defenses. The weight of the horde threatened to push them back. More than that, they were constantly accosted by the brood beasts from above, making it much harder to remain alive. For now they had not met a creature powerful enough to be a lethal threat, which was a testament to how incredibly durable both masters were, but it was only a matter of time. Sonny growled, and then called upon the shadows. Instantly, dark hands rose from the ground, grabbing the abominations and either throwing them aside or outright tearing their bodies to pieces. Black chains whipped in the air, obliterating lunging brood beasts.
If you have a good memory or two, use them now.
Dale bashed a leaping abomination with his shield, turning its body into a bloody paste, and tore something off his belt. In the next moment, there was a blinding flash, and then a sound akin to the roar of an angry dragon shook the world. Sonny smelled the carnage before he witnessed it. In front of them, a morbid path of charred corpses cut through the horde. Dale pushed Sonny forward and lunged into the momentary rift in the mass of nightmare creatures.
That one has to accumulate charges for a long time. We won't be able to use it against the tyrant.
Sonny snarled as he ran.
We need to find the damn bastard first. Don't hold back.
A few minutes of frenzied slaughter later, battered but alive, they reached the edge of the cliff and plunged. Sonny had turned into a shadow once again, while Dale utilized an enchanted rope with a vicious hook tied to its end. The hook had been ruthlessly thrust into the flesh of an especially massive nightmare creature just a second before. Down on the stone beach, there were much fewer abominations. Some of them had already been cleaned to the bone by the brood beasts, while others were alive and full of murderous fury. Some distance away, Sonny could see the tall walls of the port fortresses and the shapes of gargantuan ships resting on the waves. As he looked around in search of their prey, something flew from the darkness, forcing him to jump aside. It turned out to be a massive chunk of bleeding flesh that had been the torso of a nightmare creature, seemingly only moments ago. Looking at where the chunk of flesh came from, Sonny witnessed a chilling sight. Out there, ahead of them, halfway to the dark water, a towering being besieged by a mob of abominations. 6 segmented legs, a tail with a long stinger, torn and broken leathery wings, and 3 terrifying circular maws swaying on the ends of long necks. As he watched, one of the monstrosity's maws shot down, biting into the body of a powerful nightmare creature. With a violent twist, the creature came undone, rivers of blood and viscera spilling onto the cold stones. At the same time, the other 2 maws shredded a couple more abominations, swallowing large chunks of them whole. The tail stinger shot forward with blinding speed, piercing another and pumping poison into its convulsing body. Sonny gazed at the macabre scene with dark resentment.
Be careful what you wish for, I guess.
They had discovered the tyrant of the devouring cloud. As Sonny watched, the tyrant tore apart several more abominations, devouring their flesh with its 3 enormous maws. The creature was on par with the Lord of the Dead that Sonny had faced in the catacombs below the Dark City. Back then, he was merely a sleeper. Now, he was an ascendant himself, and an abnormally powerful one at that. His loyal shadows were indisposed, but he was accompanied by Dale instead. There was no reason for this fight to be too hard. However, they had a big problem. The more nightmare creatures the tyrant killed and devoured, the more invigorated it seemed. The ghastly injuries on its wings were already healing, and very soon, the monstrosity would be able to take flight again. Sonny could not allow that to happen. Glancing at Dale with a grave expression, he said,
"It's now or never!"
Above them, a swarm of brood beasts separated from the dark mass of the devouring cloud, rushing down to protect their ruler. Dale nodded and silently lunged forward, closing in on the tyrant to trap the monstrosity, and the 2 of them with it. Inside a barrier of shimmering energy, Sonny followed, cutting down several abominations that had tried to bar their passage. However, the towering monstrosity seemed to have sensed the advancing threat, or maybe grew tired of the relentless attacks by the other nightmare creatures. It suddenly jumped, soaring high into the air, its broken wings raising a powerful gale. The tyrant had not managed to stay in the air for long. At least, not yet. But it succeeded in creating some distance between itself and the pursuers. Then, moving with stunning speed, it turned in the direction of the port fortress and ran. Sonny's eyes narrowed.
Damnation!
It only took him a split second to make a decision and shout,
"I'll slow it down! Catch up as fast as you can and set up the barrier!"
With that, he left Dale behind and turned into a swift shadow. Flying with terrible speed across the stone beach, Sonny pursued the tyrant. The monstrosity barreled forward like a speeding train, its 6 legs turning countless stones into rubble and dust. Its wings were healing more and more. Close enough from the port fortress to be seen from its walls, Sonny finally overtook the monstrosity and jumped out of the shadow right in front of it. The Sin of Solace flashed, cutting one of the creature's limbs, and it toppled heavily to the ground. He barely managed to dodge the massive body. But in the next moment, the tyrant's stinger was already shooting through the air, aimed at his heart.
Ah!
Sonny blocked the terrifying deadly spike with the flat of the jade jian, at the same time turning his body as heavy as he could. The impact pushed him back, his feet leaving 2 grooves in the stones. The monstrosity struggled to stand up, but a dozen jet-black hands rose from the ground, grabbing and pressing it down. 3 long necks of the tyrant twisted like snakes. 2 maws bit into the shadow hands, tearing them apart, while the third flew towards Sunny. Staring at the repulsive fleshy circle full of razor-sharp fangs, he shuddered and realized that the thing could swallow him whole. Sunny shifted his weight and dashed aside, narrowly dodging the maw, then lashed out with the Sin of Solace as a bloody wound appeared on the abomination's neck. An ear-splitting wail slammed into him like a hammer. The shadows he had manifested were all but gone, and the tyrant was nowhere near being immobilized. Sunny could waste more essence creating shadow implements, maybe even encasing the monstrosity and himself in a large dome, but what he needed to do was damage its wings. Sadly, the monstrosity was fiercely determined to protect them. As soon as Sunny tried to get closer to the abomination's wings, its stinger, 3 maws, and 5 remaining legs all came after him. He scrambled to dodge the hurricane of attacks, dancing between them like a demented acrobat. Shards of stone and wet sand rose like a cloud into the air.
Curse you!
The tyrant's movements were growing more frenzied and chaotic. Its mind was being assaulted by the sinister whisper of the cursed sword. The effect of the charm was going to persist, too, driving the monstrosity utterly mad. Funnily enough, the same erratic behavior seemed to be repeating in the skies above them, where a large portion of the devouring cloud seemed to have lost a lot of its unnatural cohesion. They would only cease to be a threat to the city once both tyrants were dead, though. The massive abomination understood that there was something strange going on with its mind as well. It tried to disengage and lowered itself to the ground as if preparing to jump again. Only this time, its wings might have been healed enough to allow the tyrant to fly.
No!
Before it could escape, however, a dome of shimmering energy suddenly appeared around them. The tyrant jumped, slammed into the roof of the dome, and plummeted back down. The heavily armored figure of Dale slammed into its body, a flanged mace falling to crush another of the creature's legs. The 3 of them were now locked inside the barrier. The tyrant would not be able to escape anymore. However, the dome of energy was not particularly large. It barely encompassed the enormous body of the winged monstrosity and a few meters of stone shore around it, leaving Sunny and Dale no room to maneuver. It was like being locked in a tiny cage with a very angry, starving tiger. If the tiger was the size of a small building, had 3 heads, and possessed the tail of a scorpion, and had also been driven into rabid insanity by a whispering jade sword.
Crap.
The tyrant wailed again, its screeching voice full of madness and fury. Then it rose from the ground, and all hell broke loose. Trapped in the small bubble of the energy barrier, the tyrant turned into a murderous hurricane, moving with speed that was surprising for such a large creature. It thrashed and spun, trying to rip the hateful humans apart. Sunny and Dale had managed to dodge or deflect the barrage of devastating attacks for now, but avoiding being crushed by the sheer mass of the frenzied monstrosity was even harder. The barrier was just too small to move away, leaving them no choice but to try and straddle it. That had not been a good choice. Even on the tyrant's back, the 3 maws and the stinger could attack them freely. More than that, the abomination instantly rolled on the ground, throwing them off. Sunny barely avoided being crushed, buried under the mountain of flesh. Just a handful of seconds after Dale had erected the barrier, he felt the salty taste of blood on his tongue. Both ascended were battered and wounded. Of course, the tyrant was not unscathed either. 3 of its legs were gone. Its body was covered with a multitude of deep cuts, and one of its necks was halfway to being severed. Better yet, the creature seemed to have surrendered to its most primal instincts, driven into madness by the Sin of Solace. The bestial rage of the tyrant was terrifying, but it would have been much more dangerous to fight the monstrosity if it had retained its inhuman intellect. A smart enemy was infinitely deadlier than a senseless one. Now, all they had to do was put it down.
Cut off its head!
I'm trying!
Dale's shield was wedged into one of the tyrant's necks, and as Sonny yelled, he hammered its rim with his mace, as if driving a nail into wood. The heater shield sliced through the flesh of the abomination like a blade, causing a river of black blood to spill onto the stones. Half deafened by the creature's shriek, Sonny manifested a wall of shadow to defend Dale from one of the remaining 2 maws. The wall broke under the monstrous assault, but by that time, the Ascended had hammered his shield one last time, and one of the tyrant's heads flew off.
Damn!
After that, Sonny had to worry about himself. The wounded creature shifted, slamming him into the barrier with the looming bulk of its body. Bone weave and marble shell saved him from being turned into bloody paste, but he was trapped, crushed, and unable to breathe. What's worse, there was no escape. Well, for most people. Sonny simply dissipated into the shadow, projected onto the creature's body by the shimmering barrier, and appeared on the other side of the abomination, his sword already falling to bite into its side. Just like that, the dire battle continued. Sonny and Dale were one mistake away from being greatly injured or killed at every moment, but neither of them had made that mistake yet. As time went on, their enemy grew more and more frenetic, but the 2 masters only grew more effective in their attempts to butcher it. They were learning how to better hurt it, with every blow, dodge, and step. Dale's armor cracked, but in return, the tyrant's stinger was shattered by the heavy flanged mace. Sonny was now bleeding from a deep cut above his left eye, but in return, one of the tyrant's maws was missing half of its fangs. Using a momentary opening, created by the monstrosity throwing all of its weight against the barrier, Sonny finally managed to position himself for an all-out attack. He dashed forward, turning his body light to create momentum, and slashed the Sin of Solace across the base of one of the creature's necks. The Jade Jian seemed to laugh as it sliced through the tough hide, steel muscles and unbreakable bones of the tyrant emerging from the other side of its neck in a fountain of blood. The second of the 3 maws fell to the ground.
One more.
Dale received an earth-shattering blow on his shield and slid back with a low grunt. His hand trembled a little.
The barrier won't hold for much longer. We must hurry!
Sonny did not need to be reminded. He already felt that the shadows surrounding them were changing. The shimmering energy was growing dimmer every time the tyrant slammed into it. By now, most of its shine was already gone. But the creature had lost most of its weapons as well. It was bleeding heavily, maimed and wounded, its speed gradually decreasing. Sonny knew not to let his guard down. These last moments were often the most deadly, both because human fighters tended to get overconfident when the victory neared, and because their enemies would often abandon all caution in one last desperate attempt to destroy the opposition and survive. Still, this had to end quickly.
Risky.
The thought flashed through his mind, but Sonny was already moving. Pushing himself forward, he deflected a glancing blow from the creature's tail and slammed into the tyrant like a cannonball. Thrown off balance, the monstrosity reeled and then threw itself into a fierce retaliatory attack. Sonny managed to dodge its legs, but not its maw. He simply slashed at it with the Sin of Solace, feeling the flesh part before the jade blade. At the same time, the creature left itself completely open to Dale. The stalwart master lunged forward, his mace suddenly igniting with a dangerous red glow. The moment it connected with the base of the tyrant's last remaining neck, The flanged head of the mace exploded with ominous light, and something thundered. Sunny saw the shape of the abomination's neck melting in the furious red light as it was torn apart. Then, for a second, he could not think about anything anymore. Moments before it died, the tyrant managed to grab his shoulder with its maw and fling Sunny into the air. Feeling a pulse of tearing pain, he found himself flying backward away from the dying creature. His back connected with the weakened barrier and shattered it, the marble shell turning rigid from the impact. Sunny landed gracelessly a dozen meters away from the convulsing body of the tyrant, rolled for a few meters more, and came to a stop at the edge of the water. A pained groan escaped from his lips.
That hurt.
He slowly sat up and glanced at his shoulder. The leather pauldron of the puppeteer's shroud was pierced in several places, and there were deep scratches on his skin. The tyrant's fangs, however, had not cut deep. The lacerations were shallow. He took a shaky breath and looked up. High above, the devouring cloud seemed aimless and lost. Without malevolent purpose guiding the swarm of brood beasts, they were being slowly obliterated by the city defenses. Saint and Master Jet must have finished off their tyrant as well. Sunny glanced at Dale, who seemed rather battered, but alive.
We won.
By all accounts, he was supposed to feel jubilation and relief. Even though the battle was not over, the irregulars had accomplished their task. Today, the First Army was going to celebrate a victory. However, Sunny did not feel relieved. Instead, he felt cold. Very, very cold. And frightened.
What the hell is this feeling?
Struggling against a deep sense of unease, Sunny shivered and turned to the black waves, his hand reaching for the hilt of the Sin of Solace. Just as he did, the water parted, and someone, appeared from below it. Sunny froze, staring with wide eyes. His face paled terribly. There was a man walking out of the ocean, water flowing from his armor. He was tall with a powerful build. His hair was dark, and his bloodless face was empty. Not a hint of emotion hiding in his hollow eyes. Instead, there was something different in them. Something vast, alien, and terrifying. The man slowly appeared from the water and took a firm step toward Sunny, looming above him like a hollow wraith. The empty stare of his glassy eyes fell. Sunny's hand shook. Stunned, he tried to crawl back and whispered in a faint, trembling voice.
Vern?
For a moment or two, Sunny's mind was empty. He crawled back, looking up at the familiar figure towering above him. Vern. It was Vern. There was no mistake. Or something wearing Vern's corpse, at least. His shadow was much more vast and dreadful than a human's shadow was supposed to be. The hollow gaze of the dead master pursued Sunny, his face still and unmoving like a mask. Behind him, the dark waves stirred, and more figures rose from the water. Men, women, dozens of them, hundreds even. They marched forward like an army of the dead, silent and emotionless, their eyes drowning in darkness. All their shadows were wrong. The people of LO-49 that Sunny had left to die. He recognized all of them. Staring at the undulating surface of the ocean in horror.
The terror.
Strangely, It was the contemptuous laugh of the cursed sword that shattered his paralysis.
Look, lost from light, your sins have come to haunt you.
Sonny shuddered, coming to his senses.
What sins, you bastard? I did everything I could to save them.
The insidious voice laughed again, then whispered, its hissing words falling like drops of poison.
Weakness is also a sin, you pitiful worm. It is the greatest sin of them all.
Sonny snarled, then rose to his feet and froze for a split second, thinking feverishly about the situation. After chasing the tyrant, he was now behind the city. There were tall cliffs between the ocean and the northern wall of Falcon Scott, so nothing could escape the shore without being torn to shreds by the defensive armaments. Granted, most of the First Army forces were currently concentrated on the southern side of the wall, fighting against the devouring cloud. The port fortress was nearby, though, and defended by its garrison. Bloodwave and the Awakened of the House of Night were also there, protecting the anchored ships and overseeing the loading of the refugees. 1,000 enthralled corpses were not going to put a dent in the defenses of the port. As for the terror itself, just as that thought flashed through Sonny's mind, he saw something that made his blood run cold. There, behind the slowly advancing figures of the drowned residents of LO-49, the black water seethed and boiled, releasing even more thralls. Nightmare creatures, thousands of them, were rising from the waves, all moving with the same silent, harrowing dispassion. He took an involuntary step back, then steeled himself and raised the sin of solace. The terror's thralls could not be allowed to reach the port. Hundreds of thousands of refugees were currently there, with even more already on the ships. Thankfully, the elevator platforms leading to Falcon Scott were empty, and the evacuation stopped briefly on account of the devouring cloud. The defenders of the metropolis had also spotted the new threat. Powerful beams of light fell from above, illuminating the quiet horde. An instant later, a hail of bullets was supposed to tear into it. But it didn't. The spotlights moved on, as if not noticing anything. Instead of an obliterating onslaught of heavy rounds, all that came were a few sporadic streams of rifle bullets. The armaments on the wall of the port fortress were silent too. Sonny felt a chill run down his spine.
The hex.
He did not get a chance to finish the thought. Vern suddenly disappeared, moving with much more speed than he had been capable of as a human. Sonny shifted, trying to deflect the incoming attack, but his reaction was too slow. A devastating blow sent him flying backward, the breath knocked out of him entirely. He crashed to the ground and rolled, feeling cold numbness spreading through his chest.
Curse it!
He had been mistaken in assessing the enemy's power based on how powerful the thralls had been before falling prey to the terror. Whatever the creature had done to them had made them into something much more dangerous than their former selves.
You are a neglectful fool, aren't you?
Struggling to inhale, Sonny gritted his teeth. Indeed, he had already known that the hexed residents were capable of showing unnatural strength. Why would the slaves be different? If anything, their change would be greater. One master, 100 or so awakened, close to 1,000 mundane soldiers, several hundreds of civilians, and thousands upon thousands of nightmare creatures, all controlled and changed by the terror, with everyone seemingly blind to their existence. The situation was not good. Feeling true fear for the first time in a long while, Sonny forced himself to rise once again and look at the hollow-eyed horde.
No, not everyone.
Although most of the defenders seemed to be ignoring the terror's thralls, Some were still firing their rifles. That meant that the creature's hex was not absolute. With so many residents around, it could only do so much. There was a restriction to its power, which meant that it could be defeated. There was a sound of metal scraping against the stone behind him. Looking back, Sonny saw Dale approaching, his buckler raised and dripping with blood. His heart skipped a beat.
Dale, do you see them?
The heavily armored master turned his head slightly. Darkness nestled in the slit of his visor. His voice sounded a little muffled.
What are you talking about?
Sonny's heart fell. But then, Dale continued.
How would I miss thousands of creatures crawling from the ocean? Of course I see them. The question is, why are the wall armaments still silent?
More and more nightmare creatures emerged from the water, flooding the shore. Sonny found Vern and shivered, noticing that the dead master was staring at him as well.
It's the terror of LO-49. The wretched thing is messing with people's minds. We need to...
The hollow horde suddenly stopped moving. Thousands of heads turned in unison, countless empty eyes all staring at a single point. Sonny shivered.
I guess it recognized me as well.
The horde rushed forward. Across the city to the south, the majority of the First Army forces were fighting the devouring cloud. Even directionless, the gluttonous swarm still posed an existential threat to Falcon Scott. The sky was torn asunder by fire and explosions, countless brood beasts melting in that inferno as they threw themselves against the siege capital's defenses. Somewhere further south, far away, Skytide was once again engaged in a dreadful battle against the corrupted Titan, Winter Beast. And yet, here on the shore of the Dark Ocean, a new threat appeared, one that was perhaps no less dangerous than the devouring cloud. Worst of all, no one except for two masters and a handful of disparate soldiers seemed to be aware of it. Or so Sonny had thought. The instant the Hollow Horde surged forward, the port fortress finally came alive. Numerous turrets turned their barrels, unleashing an onslaught of bullets at the thralls of the Terror of the Depths. Bright beams of light once again shone on the shore, and several railguns thundered, cutting rifts through the horde. Arrows and magical projectiles fell like rain. The thralls had turned out to be too potent to be obliterated by the sudden assault, but they did slow down for a moment.
Finally, some luck.
Sonny prepared to launch himself into the mass of enemies, but Dale suddenly pulled him back.
What the hell are you doing?
The stalwart master glanced at him calmly, then shook his head.
There's no time for that. The real foe is the Terror, not its puppets. You need to go find Bloodwave, or someone from the House of Night at least. They need to find the creature and destroy it before it's too late.
Sonny blinked.
What about you?
Dale turned to the advancing horde, lingered for a moment, and shrugged.
I'll stay and make sure that they do not breach the wall of the port.
There were a lot of words left unsaid, but they both understood the implications. Dale was best at stationary defense, while Sonny was swift and elusive. Their roles were decided for them by that uncomplicated reality, and there was nothing to discuss. The heavily armored master took a step forward, raising his shield and mace.
Go, Sunless. Don't linger.
Sonny opened his mouth, then closed it without saying anything. Throwing one last glance at the figure of Vern, who was walking steadily through the hellish barrage of bullets without paying them any attention, he gritted his teeth and dove into the shadows. Behind him, the first of the thralls was already lunging at Dale, hollow eyes shining with the reflected moonlight.
Damn it!
Swiftly gliding through the darkness, he soon reached the wall of the port fortress and scaled it. emerging from the shadows on the battlements. Here a chaotic flurry of activity was boiling. Soldiers awakened feverishly, sending rivers of bullets, arrows, and magic into the horde of thralls. On the other side of the wall, Sonny could see a large crowd of terrified refugees filling a large courtyard below. They had come here to board one of the ships and escape the doomed siege, but got stuck in the middle of the battle instead. Ignoring the grim sight, he ran across the battlement toward the citadel of the fortress. If he could not find what he sought there, he would proceed past the citadel toward the pier, and from there to the battleships if need be. As Sonny ran, he looked around, hoping to see someone from the House of Night among the defenders. He got lucky sooner than he had expected. The wall of the port fortress had towers rising above it at set intervals, each serving as a bunker. As he passed through one of these bunkers, observing the complicated machinery of the railgun housed within, he noticed a familiar figure standing near a targeting interface. Tall, handsome, with black hair that sometimes seemed inky blue.
Neve!
Sonny dashed toward the Nightwalker, who looked up from the terminal with a surprised expression.
Sunless, what are you?
Sonny waved a hand, interrupting him.
Long story. Are you free from the hex? Can you see the monsters?
He realized something, and then looked around with a bit of confusion.
Actually, never mind. How are all of you able to see them?
Neve lingered for a moment.
Nightwalkers like me have a high affinity to guidance and revelations. The ocean and its depths, too. So many of us were able to see through the hex. As for the rest of the garrison, they don't see anything, but they also don't need to. As long as someone provides them with the targeting data, they are shooting blindly in the direction where we point.
Sonny froze for a moment, admiring the effective crudeness of that simple solution. Then, his face darkened. On the wall outside the bunker, one of the soldiers suddenly lowered his rifle, remained motionless for a moment, then took a step forward and jumped over the parapet of the battlement, disappearing into the cold water below without a sound. No one seemed to notice his absence.
Where's Bloodwave?
Neve pointed north, toward the pier.
Protecting the ships. Why?
Sonny answered with urgency obvious in his voice.
This battle can't be won unless the source of the hex is destroyed. The terror of LO-49. We need to find and kill it. Staying on the defensive will only allow that fiend to propagate its influence throughout the city, killing countless people and growing its army. The House of Night and your saint are our best bet.
The Nightwalker stared at him for a few moments. His tired face paled a little.
You want us to forsake the ships, dive into the ocean, and fight the terror in its territory?
Sonny simply nodded.
Exactly. And I'll dive with you too.
Neve hesitated for a bit, then sighed.
Well, all right. Follow me then. I'll take you to see my uncle.
Sonny blinked a couple of times.
Wait, that's it? I thought I would have to persuade you.
The Nightwalker gave him a strange look.
I was persuaded the instant you uttered this battle can't be won, Sunless. Terror is one of the top targets anyway. So come, let us hunt the bastard down.
As Neve and Sonny made their way across the wall of the port fortress, the battle grew louder behind them. Sounds of screams rose into the night sky, and the battlements beneath them shuddered. Ignoring all of it, they rushed forward. As they ran, Neve yelled,
Have you ever even fought in the water?
Sonny spared him a tense look, remembering the harrowing journey across the dark sea on the forgotten shore. The boat that Nephis had built from the bones of demons that did not survive till the end.
Once.
The Nightwalker let out a nervous laugh.
How did it go?
Sonny gritted his teeth.
I'm still alive, aren't I?
There was not much of a choice anyway. Neve was probably the only one to ascend from the House of Night inside the fortress. The rest were protecting the battleships sailing across the strait. Bloodwave was going to need all the help he could get, so Sunny had to join the hunt for the dreadful terror. Plus, he wanted to. The abominable creature deserved to die, and especially so by his hand. It wouldn't be easy, though. Sunny had a couple of memories that would help perform well underwater, but he lacked experience when it came to fighting in the depths of the ocean. Worse than that, Shadow Step and Shadow Manifestation would be nearly useless there. A shadow needed a solid surface to exist, and those were hard to find where he was going. Actually, Sunny was unsure how his aspect would function underwater. Much more distressing was the fact that he did not know much about the terror of LO-49 and what the abomination was truly capable of. The fact that it relied on mind attacks and manipulation suggested a lack of physical might, but even then, such things were highly relative when it came to a corrupted creature. Really, he was not even sure that the terror was of the corrupted rank.
What the hell am I doing here?
The Sin of Solace laughed, forcing Sunny to grimace. It did not matter. Even disregarding the fact that he had a personal score to settle, the creature had to be destroyed to protect the city.
But what are you doing risking your life to protect that city? That's not like you, lost from light.
Sunny did not know how to answer, but he refused to let the voice of the sword distract him from the task at hand. They were already on the pier, swiftly moving toward its end. Some distance away, 2 gargantuan battleships rested on the undulating black waves. He looked around, not noticing the distinct figure of the enigmatic saint anywhere.
Where is Bloodwave? Is he aboard one of the ships?
Neve gave him a confused look as he took off his midnight blue coat. Beneath it was a black wetsuit, an armor-type memory already weaving itself from sparks of light. What do you mean? He's in the water, of course, below the ships. Sunny blinked.
Oh, of course.
He hesitated for a moment, then dismissed the puppeteer's shroud. Left wearing nothing but his underwear, Sunny shivered in the cold wind. His pale skin was painted black by the shadow wrapping around his body, and his lean muscles seemed like they had been cut from matte obsidian. He sighed, then summoned 3 memories. First, a large and beautiful white pearl appeared in his hand. Sunny lingered for a moment, then placed it on his tongue before closing his mouth. The essence pearl would allow him to breathe and see underwater. Then, a piece of an icy blue crystal inlaid in the form of dull metal appeared hanging around his neck on a black string. The memory of ice. Using 2 charms at once would consume essence faster, but Sunny had to protect himself from the lethal cold of the winter ocean. It was only possible to augment one at a time with the underworld armament trait of the marble shell, so he chose the blue crystal. Lastly, a harness made from a fisherman's net wrapped around his torso, the nimble catch. With that, Sunny was more or less ready to dive into the water, at least physically. The only problem was he needed both hands to swim, but that was easily remedied by fastening the Sin of Solace to the nimble catch. The harness was very handy in that regard. With the jade blade strapped safely to his back, Sunny walked over to the very edge of the pier and glanced at Neve. The Night Walker was already clad in light armor that seemed to be made of black seaweed and an aqueous shell. A smile appeared on Neve's face. Ready? Sunny stared at the tumultuous dark wave beneath them and shook his head. Then, he jumped. The ocean grasped him in its cold embrace a moment later. Sunny almost panicked. A deluge of unpleasant memories instantly surfaced in his mind, but then he discovered that he could breathe normally, despite being surrounded by water. That calmed him down a little. The essence pearl had a strange effect. Sunny could breathe through his nose, as if he were standing on solid ground, and there seemed to be an invisible barrier, preventing the salty water from flowing up his nostrils. Additionally, the active enchantment of the charm allowed him to see clearly through the dark expanse of the ocean, as if he were wearing a diving mask. He was cold, but not terribly so. It seemed that the high elemental resistance of the marble shell, augmented by the shadows, was enough to protect him from freezing to death. Adding the memory of ice on top of that turned out to be overkill. Sonny dismissed the blue crystal, relieved to save some essence.
Not too bad.
A moment later, Neve plunged into the water beside him and swam nimbly forward and down. Sonny had learned how to swim during his wilderness survival lessons back at the academy and practiced it a few times on the forgotten shore. And yet, one glance at the scion of the House of Night made him feel embarrassed. The Night Walker moved through the water with great speed and ease, looking like some kind of graceful aquatic creature. It almost seemed as if he was more comfortable in the water than he had been on land. Maybe he was. Sighing inwardly, Sonny followed. His movements might not have been as natural or graceful as Neve's, but with the frightening strength of an ascended devil and the help of the nimble catch, he found himself more than capable of keeping up. They dove deeper into the dark water, soon reaching the ships. Sonny felt the tremendous shadow floating silently below, a few moments before he saw it. There, in the darkness, a monstrous killer whale was waiting, watching them with its giant blue eyes. Sonny had seen Bloodwave in his bestial form once from afar, but up close, the Saint of Night was much more terrifying. The creature he had transformed into looked somewhat like a killer whale, its hide black and white, the lines of its body smooth and predatory. However, it was much, much larger than any mundane beast had any right to be. There was a patchwork of ugly scars covering its hide, and steel armor encasing its long fins, edges sharp like blades. Its enormous eyes glowed in the darkness of the ocean with blue light, full of willpower and intelligence. Even knowing that the killer whale was a human, Sonny couldn't help but feel tense in front of the great predator. Since the beginning of the siege of Falcon Scott, Bloodwave had rarely shown himself. He mostly remained underwater, protecting the anchored ships and fighting those nightmare creatures that would try to attack the city from the depths. Army Command did not dare leave the port fortress and the vulnerable vessels without a defender. And yet, today, that was exactly what had to happen. While Sonny stared at the mighty saint, Neve glided forward and then hovered in front of the killer whale's snout, keeping himself in place with barely noticeable movements of his arms and legs. The tall master looked tiny beside the giant creature. Sonny realized that he did not know how to communicate with others underwater. He couldn't speak or even open his mouth, unless he wanted to lose the essence pearl and suffocate. There was probably a system of signs one could learn, but he had not done that in advance. The world was silent. No, not quite, actually. The ocean was full of sounds. They were just strange and muffled, reverberating through his bones as if he was hearing them with his entire body. The noise of the battle above was like a low, all-encompassing, distant roar. Sonny knew that sound was supposed to propagate very far in the water, but had no tools to distinguish and interpret what he heard. Nevertheless, the Night Walkers seemed to possess some method of sharing information. A few moments after Neve approached Bloodwave, the killer whale shifted slightly, staring into the depths of the ocean. His pupils narrowed. Then, a strange thing happened. The eyes of the great predator remained clear and blue, but the water itself seemed suddenly tinted dark crimson around them. Sonny felt extremely uncomfortable, as if Bloodweave did not like what was happening at all. Then the sensation passed as swiftly as it had appeared, and the ocean was normal once again. Neve turned around and beckoned for him to come closer. Struggling against the instinctual fear of large predators, Sonny swam toward the monstrous killer whale. Once he got close, there was suddenly a familiar voice in his ears.
"My uncle agrees. We have to kill the terror."
Sonny stared at the Nightwalker silently. Neve tilted his head a little.
"Oh, you can't speak. Well, there's nothing to discuss anyway.
All the available information about the creature was already given to us by Tyrus of Whitefeather. We can only attack the terror and do our best. How is your resistance against mind attacks? Sonny made a fist and raised his thumb. He doubted that any master had better mental defenses than him. Plus, he was already inoculated against the terror's hex. The Nightwalker nodded. Good. Taking our awakened into the depths would just mean giving the creature more puppets to control. The three of us will have to hunt alone. Once we discover the terror, Bloodwave will lead the charge, while our task will be to support him. Maybe we'll even survive. Who knows? Are you ready? Sonny shrugged, which was an awkward thing to do underwater. Then follow me. Neve swam even closer to the great beast, gliding parallel to Bloodwave's back. Reaching the dorsal fin that stood tall like the mast of a ship, he grabbed onto a small depression in the armor encasing it and gestured for Sonny to do the same.
Great. I'm going to ride a damned saint into the depths of a damned ocean.
Cursing his fate, Sonny followed the Nightwalker's example and latched himself to the killer whale's fin like some sort of hitchhiker fish. He could feel a vast and powerful heartbeat somewhere below him, and a mighty presence that was beyond all mundane senses. Neve's voice resounded once again in his ears. Don't let go. Well, unless you feel like the pressure is too great for you to handle. I don't know how deep the terror hides, and how deep you can dive. Sorry, Sunless. You'll have to learn how to traverse the abyss fast and on your own. Before Sonny could think of an answer, even though he could not relay it, Bloodwave suddenly moved. His great body lunged forward with stunning speed, and a powerful current almost threw Sonny off the fin. He grabbed tighter to the steel armor, feeling how strange it was to be able to breathe freely despite the rushing water. Neve stretched a hand to support him, but then brought it back, seeing that there was no need. Riding a giant killer whale into the dark depths of the ocean was perhaps not the strangest journey Sonny had made, but it was up there with the weirdest of them, especially considering that the whale was a saint of the great clan Knight. The whole situation would have been comically surreal if it wasn't so dreadful. A terrible enemy waited for them at the end of this journey. Bloodwave journeyed away from the shore, submerging deeper and deeper into the watery abyss. The world around them was ruthlessly cold and lightless, eerily similar to the sky below of the Chained Isles, but much more frightening. That was not the only similarity. The deeper they went, the more Sonny felt as if something was pressing down on him. It was as if a titanic slab of stone was weighing on his body, making it harder to move and breathe. The feeling was not dissimilar to the torturous force of the crushing, and thinking of that analogy made him very, very uneasy. The crushing was capable of killing even saints after all. He tried to control his breathing.
No mundane ocean can kill a saint. And in terms of sturdiness, I'm not that far from one.
Down and down they went. The deeper Bloodwave descended into the vast, boundless, dark abyss of the ocean, the more disturbed Sonny felt. And he had already been deeply uncomfortable before taking the plunge into the shallows. There was nothing but emptiness and oppressive darkness, both above and below them, stretching endlessly into the unknown. Even though Sonny could see through the water, unlike how it had been in the impenetrable darkness of the cursed sea of the Forgotten Shore, he was still distressed. The depths of the ocean were not a place meant for humans. They were its opposite. Coming here voluntarily was nothing but pure madness.
I might have misunderstood the Nightwalkers. They are all lunatics.
He shifted slightly and glanced at Neve, who was holding tightly to the fin of the monstrous killer whale. The currents battered them, and the pressure was slowly growing unbearable. The scion of the House of Night was not exactly calm, but his unease was caused by the prospect of fighting a corrupted terror, not the watery abyss itself. Strangely, Sonny's feelings were reversed. The terror of LO-49 was a harrowing foe indeed, but he had faced plenty of those. The ocean, on the other hand, was an alien, unfamiliar, and fundamentally hostile place. It was abysmal in the purest sense of the word. Grimacing, Sonny pulled himself closer to Bloodwave's fin and waited. He did not know what exact means the Saint was using to track the hidden terror. There was some pattern to his movements, but Sonny wasn't sure what it was. Sometimes it felt as though the great predator was choosing the direction at random, but one thing remained constant. They were always moving deeper into the darkness. Neve had not spoken to him again, but there was also no reason to. Sonny briefly considered summoning the extraordinary rock to relay his thoughts, but then discarded that idea. He had nothing useful to say, and making too much noise could attract unwanted attention. Who knew what horrors hid in the dark depths besides the terror? At some point, he felt a coughing fit rising from somewhere in his lungs and nearly panicked. The last thing Sonny wanted was to drown because of the residual trauma caused by brushing against a nightmare gate. He gritted his teeth and concentrated on suppressing the cough, forgetting even his fear of the ocean in the process. That was why he almost missed the moment when the terror finally revealed itself. Hidden in the depths of the lightless abyss, an eerily beautiful creature floated in the vast and silent darkness. Feeling a slight tremor run through the enormous body of the giant killer whale, and hearing its booming heartbeat change pace, Sonny looked into the distance. He shivered. From a distance, the terror looked akin to a strangely ghostly flower. A lily, perhaps, or a white lotus. Its pallid petals flowed and danced slowly in the darkness, some stretching for hundreds of meters into the empty abyss, some swirling around the small nebulous shape hidden in their center. The sight of it was both breathtakingly beautiful and deeply terrifying. The wide ribbons of white looked both like the petals of a flower and like the long tentacles of an ethereal creature, too alien to be described with words. When they got closer, however, Sonny discovered that they were neither petals nor pale flesh. Instead, he thought that he was looking at long stretches of white flowing cloth. He did not know if he was right, or how it even made sense. And that was not what Sonny was preoccupied with at the moment either. There were other shapes surrounding the ghostly white blossom. Hundreds of them. Drowned bodies surrounded it, like a morbid barrier. Humans, nightmare creatures, and things he could not name. They floated silently around the terror, unmoving, their empty eyes staring blindly into the darkness. Some had cloth petals wrapped around them like a burial shroud. The eerie scene made him shudder. The otherworldly beauty of it all only made the visage more appalling. There was a powerful presence emanating from the mass of billowing white cloth, one of utter horror and malice. Sonny felt that presence overwhelm him, making it impossible to look away from the terror, but also unbearable to witness it. He felt mesmerized, frozen, and paralyzed. That feeling was broken by another presence, though. Suddenly, the darkness around them seemed to become tinted red, and he felt a deep fury rising from within him. Sonny recognized that fury as something that was not his own, but instead belonged to someone else. Bloodwave. The Saint of Night was incensed, and whatever fear they might have felt was washed away by the murderous rage of the great predator. It almost seemed as though the cloth petals trembled slightly. In the next moment, the hundreds of drowned creatures all came alive, their hollow eyes turning to stare at them. Sonny uttered a silent curse and freed the Sin of Solace from its makeshift scabbard with his free hand. Here we go then. He felt Bloodwave's body move, And then a furious roar spread through the water like a fearless battle cry. The force of it was almost physical in nature, moving through the dark abyss like a devastating shockwave. The monstrous killer whale surged forward, and with him, the ocean itself came alive. Powerful currents assaulted the pallid flower, throwing its ghastly defenders away. The crimson hue of the water became more apparent, and wherever it spread, blood waves seemed to gain even more speed, even more might. At the same time, the cloth petals exploded with motion, unfurling like long limbs, grabbing the thralls and throwing them forward. By Sunny's side, Neve glanced at him and outstretched a hand, a bone harpoon appearing in it. The Nightwalker smiled, indigo lights dancing in his eyes. It's time. With that, he pushed himself off the fin and shot forward with incredible speed. A moment later, Blood Wave crashed into the moving barrier of hollow-eyed thralls. The monstrous killer whale snapped its jaws, savaging several massive nightmare creatures at once. Clouds of blood and pulverized flesh escaped from his maw like a red tide. Powerful currents of crimson water swirled around his massive body, ripping even more abominations apart. A dozen thralls were destroyed when the great predator rammed through them at dreadful speed. Armored fins moved, slicing bodies like giant blades. A split second later, Blood Wave shot past the barrier of flesh, leaving devastation in his wake. He continued forward, heading for the eerie flower of white cloth that was the terror. Neve and Sunny were left behind, though. Their task was to deal with the thralls and prevent them from attacking the saint from behind.
How the hell do I do this?
Fighting underwater was not at all like fighting on land. At this depth, Sunny felt as though he was constantly being pressed down by an immeasurable weight, both from without and from within. His ascended physique and augmented strength were enough to deal with it, but he still felt a strain considerable enough to demand adjustment. It was a lot like fighting while under the effect of the crushing. More importantly, though, there was nothing to support him here. Usually a fighter's might came from being grounded. Without the ground under Sunny's feet, his blows would lack any power. They would also push him away with the same force that had been exerted on the enemy, making battle flow and positioning a nightmare. So he saw two ways to fight effectively. One was to grapple the enemy and use their own body as support, bringing combat to an extremely close range. He would be greatly disadvantaged in such a scenario due to the length of his blade. The other was to use acceleration and maneuvering to turn each of his attacks into a deadly charge. Sunny had a sinking suspicion that he would have to utilize both approaches today. Ahead of him, Neve clashed with one of the thralls. His harpoon shot forward, piercing the creature's head. The Nightwalker pushed it through all the way, then let go of the shaft, grabbed it again near the head a moment later, and tore the spear free. Then Sunny had no more time to observe the Nightwalker, forced to concentrate on his own enemy. A vaguely familiar abomination that resembled a grotesque mannequin of flesh lunged at him, its hollow eyes full of darkness. A menacing bone scythe cut down, threatening to split Sunny apart. He was somewhat certain that his skin would withstand the edge, but there was no point in taking the risk. The Sin of Solace moved to intercept the strike, much slower than he was used to, but still viciously fast. The blade cut easily through the scythe, breaking it, and then continued forward to sever the flesh mannequin from shoulder to thigh. The spell whispered into his ear, its voice unaffected by the heavy mass of water.
You have slain a fallen monster, your shadow.
With no time to listen to it, Sunny suppressed his revulsion and used the bleeding remains of the abomination to launch himself sideways. A moment later, a chitinous body barreled through the spot he had been occupying. 5 more were already closing in on him from 5 different directions. Sunny took a deep breath.
This is not too bad.
The situation was dire. but not as hopeless as he had expected. The greatest threat, the terror itself, was currently preoccupied with Bloodwave. The thralls, meanwhile, were numerous and much more powerful than they had the right to be. However, there was one factor working against them. Most of the thralls were no more native to the dark abyss of the ocean than he was. Their movements were purposeful, but a little bit awkward. Their initial assault was dreadful, but mostly because many had been launched forward by the long pieces of white cloth that swirled around and trailed behind the terror, behaving like the tentacles of a giant monster. Now that their momentum was spent, the thralls